Chapter 637. Okay. Lin Sun agreed without hesitation. Qin Yunyang led the way first without hesitation. On the way, Lin Sun also learned that in this treasure auction, when the big shots of many ethnic forces came, there were also many outstanding young people like Qin Yunyang following them. Among these young people, there were many top figures like Qin Yunyang. Qin Yunyang had received an invitation to come and participate in this gathering that belonged to the younger generation of each race. A quarter of an hour later, in the Wind Tower. This place had been booked, and there were elite guards outside the tower. Without an invitation, it was impossible to enter. Don't make trouble for me. When they arrived here, Qin Yunyang warned Lin Sun again. It seemed that he was still worried about Lin Sun. This was normal. If Lin Sun was really the young devil, once he made trouble, the consequences would be extremely serious. This was a gathering of the young generation of all clans. If there was any conflict, who could bear it? In Qin Yunyang's view, Lin Sun was such a dangerous and cruel person. He was afraid that Lin Sun would kill people if he didn't agree, so he warned Lin Sun again and again. Lin Sun was a little funny. How could he be the kind of person who liked to make trouble? In order not to attract attention, he had disguised himself before he set foot on Cloud Ping Island. Even his temperament became more plain and ordinary, in order not to attract attention. It couldn't be helped. If his identity was exposed, the consequences would be dire. Therefore, Lin Sun would not take the initiative to make trouble without Qin Yunyang's warning. In spite of this, Lin Sun solemnly promised Qin Yunyang. It turns out to be the holy son of Green Turtle Tribe. Please. After the guard's inspection, Lin Sun and Qin Yunyang entered the Wind Tower smoothly. On the top floor of the Wind Tower, there was an extremely magnificent and spacious hall, which could accommodate hundreds of people. It was magnificent. From here, you could even overlook half of Cloud Ping Island. When Lin Sun and Qin Yunyang arrived, the hall was already full of practitioners, all of whom were outstanding figures of the young generation of all clans. The men were handsome and the women were beautiful. Although they were dressed differently, all of them had extremely strong qi. Almost all of them were in Tao Insight Realm. Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion. In Xiao Empire, Tao Insight Realm practitioners like Yao Tuahai could dominate a province and be worshipped by countless practitioners. However, in the depths of the Soul Oblivion Sea, Grotto Heaven Realm experts could be seen everywhere, and they were all of the younger generation. There was not a single expert of the older generation. Such a lineup and number were far beyond the reach of the cultivation world of Xiao Empire. Young Master Yunyang, what took you so long? At the instant he arrived at the entrance of the hall, a young man with violet hair and a proud expression frowned, and he seemed to be extremely displeased with Qin Yunyang's late arrival. To Lin's surprise, Qin Yunyang, who used to be extremely proud, seemed to be quite afraid of this young man. With a touch of embarrassment on his face, he explained, "Sorry, I cut the crap. Come in and take a seat." The purple-haired youth interrupted impatiently. He didn't spare Qin Yunyang another glance, withdrawing his gaze. Qin Yunyang's expression flickered, and he seemed to be somewhat angry. However, in the end, he restrained himself and led Lin Sun to a corner of the hall. At this time, only this corner was left empty. Lin Sun saw all this, and he couldn't help but be lost in thought. He didn't ask any more questions, because it wasn't suitable to do so under such circumstances. The hall was very lively. The outstanding talents of the younger generation of various clans were gathered here. There were many handsome men and beautiful women, and they were drinking and chatting. Speaking of this treasure auction, although the scale can be said to be unprecedented and grand, those who can participate in it are all great figures of the older generation, and it has little to do with us. Suddenly, a young man in a black robe sitting in the seat of honor spoke in a clear voice, and it immediately attracted the attention of the entire hall. Lin Sun was keenly aware that those gazes that looked at the young man in a black robe more or less carried a trace of fear or respect. Obviously, the status of this young man in a black robe was very high, and it was far superior to the outstanding talents of various clans present. He is Luoya, the holy son of the Black Phoenix clan. Among the holy sons of various clans in the South Sea, his fighting capacity is so strong that he can be ranked in the top 30. Qin Yunyang told Lin Sun this person's identity in a low voice, and there was a trace of deep fear in his voice. Oh, how is he compared to Nyo Tunshin of the Herculean Ox clan? Lin Sun asked. The corner of Qin Yunyang's mouth twitched fiercely, and he almost rolled his eyes. Only now did he remember that the guy beside him was an incomparably ferocious and ruthless person. There's no way to compare. Nyo Tunshin is a supreme holy son, and his fighting capacity is so strong that he can be ranked in the top 3. Qin Yunyang explained patiently, and he felt somewhat bitter in his heart. His explanation was simply superfluous. In the eyes of this guy, he probably didn't care about these things at all, right? I see. Lin Sun said in a daze. In that case, this guy should be at the same level as Graceful Peacock, the holy son of the Cloud Monkey clan, right? Qin Yunyang's forehead was full of black lines, and he was speechless. Graceful Peacock's fighting capacity is so strong that she can be ranked in the top 10. How can Luoya compare with her? No way. Then how is he compared to the holy son of the Jade Unicorn clan? Lin Sun asked. Qin Yunyang almost collapsed, and he wanted to cry but had no tears. The holy sons that this guy mentioned were all tyrannical. How could Luoya compare with them? The most infuriating thing was that, comparatively speaking, he, Qin Yunyang, was even inferior to Luoya. Didn't this show that he, Qin Yunyang, was even more unbearable? Seeing that Qin Yunyang didn't speak, Lin Sun became more and more puzzled. Could it be that he's inferior to Linlang, the holy girl of the Bloodlion clan? Qin Yunyang was about to cry. Big brother, you'd better not ask. Can you spare me? So he's just SOSO. Lin Sun had roughly judged it, and he couldn't help but feel a little amused. Originally, he had thought that there would be many extraordinary and peerless figures participating in this gathering. Who would have thought that he had overestimated them? That's right. The strength of the circle you associate with is naturally similar to yours. I misunderstood before. Lin Sun seemed to be lost in thought, but these words of truth were like a knife that deeply pierced into Qin Yunyang's heart, making him extremely ashamed and resentful. This guy was simply too good at torturing people. Although the treasure auction has nothing to do with us, I have an important matter to discuss with you at this gathering. On the seat of honor, Luoya's expression was solemn, and his eyes were disdainful. He enjoyed the feeling of being the center of attention. I wonder what's the important matter that even alarmed Big Brother Luo? A young man asked. Luoya said in a low voice, I presume everyone has already heard of the matter of the young devil god. The matter I want to discuss this time is precisely related to this person. Young devil god. This title seemed as if it possessed a strand of magic. In just an instant, it caused the eyes of all the men and women in the hall to squint as their expressions changed slightly, and the atmosphere became much quieter along with this. Obviously, they'd heard of the ferocious deeds the young devil god had once done, and this was why they were shocked. Qin Yunyang's entire body even stiffened as his hand trembled, and the wine cup he'd just picked up was almost thrown out. Young devil god. The matter to be discussed at this gathering is actually related to this fellow beside me? Instantly, Qin Yunyang's heart clenched, and he couldn't help but glance at Lin Sun, yet he saw the latter had a composed expression and was eating a pastry with relish as if nothing had happened, and he was so comfortable that it aroused jealousy in others. This fellow is really composed. Qin Yunyang suddenly had a strong impulse, and he wished for nothing more than to crack open Lin Sun's head and see what exactly Lin Sun was thinking. Could it be that he really wasn't worried in the slightest? Wasn't he nervous? What if his identity was exposed? What would he do then? Qin Yunyang's heart was in a mess. Don't let your imagination run wild. The more you act like this, the more abnormal you seem, and it's very easy for others to notice something fishy. Lin Sun squinted at him and transmitted his voice to him. Chapter 638. What? All of you seem to have been frightened by that young devil god? Luo Ye frowned as he spoke amidst the deathly silent atmosphere, and his words caused the expressions of all the men and women present here to become slightly awkward. Taoist Luo Ye, it isn't that we're afraid, but the rumors say that this young devil god is truly too terrifying. He's simply like a god of death. We naturally don't dare to underestimate such a figure. Someone spoke up in an attempt to ease the atmosphere. Yeah, so long as it's a well-informed person in the Southern Sea, they're spreading the news of this young devil god. Even a peerless divine son like Nyo Tunshin lost at his hands. Who would dare to underestimate his ferocity? It isn't just Nyo Tunshin. Even Meng Lianqing, Kong Xiu, and Xian Luozi were suppressed by that young devil god when they joined forces. He's simply ferocious to the extreme. The others present here spoke successively as well. Meanwhile, Qin Yunyang had calmed down slightly, but his gaze was still slightly strange when he heard the fearful words everyone spoke about Lin Sun. He said in his heart, if all of you knew that the young devil god is here, then all of you would probably be shocked silly. He glanced at Lin Sun, yet he noticed that Lin Sun still seemed as if he hadn't noticed at all, and he was drinking mouthful after mouthful of fine wine. What a monster, Qin Yunyang ridiculed in his heart. All of you are right. The young devil god's accomplishments in battle are obvious to all, so I naturally won't underestimate him. Luo Ye spoke calmly and in a low voice, however, no matter how formidable he is, he's still a youth of the human race. The Southern Sea Realm is our territory, so how can we allow a human like him to act wildly? As he finished speaking, his voice suddenly rose in volume, and it was filled with righteousness and an oppressive aura. Someone couldn't help but ask, could it be that fellow Taoist Luo Ye called this gathering to discuss how to deal with that young devil god? As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of everyone present changed slightly. Yes, Luo Ye didn't deny it. According to the deductions of an old priest of my Black Phoenix clan, it can be confirmed that the young devil god hasn't left the Southern Sea Realm yet, and this is the best opportunity for us to deal with him. Even though his words were impassioned, none of the young experts present here agreed with him. Conversely, when they heard this, their expressions changed. They actually wanted to deal with that young devil god? This. Everyone hesitated. That was a young devil god. He slaughtered the experts of the various races until they were utterly defeated, and it seemed as if he was undefeatable. Deal with him? How was that any different from courting death? One had to know that back then, outside the sinkhole, there had been a group of powerful figures eyeing him covetously, but they had ultimately allowed the young fiend celestial to escape safely. Under such circumstances, making them deal with that young fiend god was simply a joke. Taoist brother Luo Ye, this action is probably inappropriate, right? Someone frowned. You have all misunderstood. Luo Ye grinned, and he seemed to be very confident when facing the questioning gazes of everyone. Perhaps we aren't a match for that young devil god, but don't forget that there are still great figures from the various clans standing behind us. But we have no enmity with that young demon god. Why do we have to deal with him? Someone snorted coldly. As soon as these words were spoken, it immediately aroused many voices of agreement. You're wrong. Luo Ye took a deep breath, and his voice was heavy. According to the information I obtained, amongst the various powers that entered the demon saint mystic realm, only that young devil god has become the greatest winner, and he possesses an unimaginably great fortune. When he spoke up to hear, a wisp of fervor suffused his eyes. Everyone, that's a great fortune related to the Saint Tao. Moreover, he killed so many saints and experts, and he plundered countless spoils of the battle. If we're able to capture him, He hadn't finished speaking when the hearts of everyone in the hall shook, and their eyes flickered indeterminately. They finally understood Luoya's intentions. So it turned out that it was for the sake of seizing the fortune and treasures possessed by the young devil god. As it was said, wealth moved the hearts of men, let alone a great fortune related to the Saint Tao. Instantly, many experts were tempted. Luoya noticed all of this, and his expression grew even more confident. It can be said that this young devil god is a living great fortune. If we're able to capture him, then our gains will absolutely be unimaginable. He paused for a moment and continued. Moreover, we only have to search for the tracks of that young devil god during this operation. When we really make a move, the great figures of the various clans will naturally arrive at the first possible moment. I think it's feasible. Instantly, someone couldn't help but agree. Right, the South Sea is our territory. If we allow that young devil god to escape, then it would seem that all the powers of the various clans are too useless. The other experts chimed in. In any case, they weren't going to make a move themselves, and they only had to search for information and tracks, so they were naturally happy to see this happen. If I leak the news. Qin Yunyang was extremely tempted when he heard this, and he couldn't help but glance at the nearby Lin Sun. Lin Sun's tranquil and indifferent eyes had suddenly looked over, and they seemed to be peaceful yet were filled with indifference and coldness. This caused Qin Yunyang to be unable to help but shudder. What a pair of cold eyes! They were like a god of slaughter that looked down upon the world and took everything to be ants. Even a butcher would feel fearful when he killed someone, but would a god of slaughter care about trampling ants to death? Suddenly, Qin Yunyang extinguished this thought and felt a chill all over his body. At this moment, he finally calmed down completely. It occurred to him that Lin Sun not only had a great fortune, but also was the sworn brother of the ancestor of the Green Turtle tribe. Even if all the others wanted to kill Lin Sun, he absolutely couldn't do so. Don't think too much. I'm not like them. Qin Yunyang explained in a low voice. I'm afraid you'll think too much. Lin Sun pointed at Qin Yunyang with a faint smile, and then withdrew his gaze. Qin Yunyang, you're so sneaky and silent. Do you have any objection to Taoist brother Luoya's proposal? Suddenly, someone shouted. It was the purple-haired young man next to him, who was looking at Qin Yunyang coldly. Lin Sun immediately raised his eyebrows. When they had just arrived here, Qin Yunyang had been severely reprimanded by this purple-haired young man. And now, this guy obviously began to find fault with Qin Yunyang again. Qin Yunyang's face suddenly changed. In an instant, he noticed that many eyes in the hall were looking at him, especially Luoya, who frowned with a trace of coldness in his eyes. Qin Yunyang stiffened all over and was a little panicked. Just when he wanted to explain, he was interrupted by the purple-haired young man. What's wrong? You can't even speak? A person like you can also become the holy son of the Green Turtle tribe. It seems that your Green Turtle tribe has really declined. The purple-haired young man sneered. The other strong men present also couldn't help but laugh. They looked like they were watching the fun, and their eyes were playful and thoughtful. It seems that Qin Yunyang's position in this group of people is a little unbearable. Lin Sun saw all this. Bang! At this time, Qin Yunyang was also annoyed. His cheeks flushed, he slapped the table and stood up. He glared at the purple-haired young man and said, Wait, Song, you've gone too far. Humph, so what if I've gone too far? The purple-haired young man called Wei Tsang said disdainfully, I forgot to tell you that Taoist brother Lan Tianqi will come later. You must not leave in advance. Lan Tianqi. When hearing this name, the atmosphere of the whole hall was obviously quiet. There was a trace of surprise and fear on the faces of all the people present. Even Luoya, who was sitting in the seat of honor, seemed to be a little moved and surprised. This made Lin Sun curious. These young men and women present were all outstanding figures in their clans, but Lan Tianqi could make them pay so much attention and fear. Obviously, he should be a ruthless character. He looked at Qin Yunyang. The latter's face was extremely ugly at the moment. He gritted his teeth, and no one knew whether it was because of anger or fear. Ha ha ha, look, this guy is afraid. Is there really no one in the Green Turtle tribe? Let a guy like you be the Holy Sun. Wei Tsang laughed and didn't hide his sarcasm. Although there were many strong men present at this moment, no one spoke out to persuade Qin Yunyang. On the contrary, they all looked on with folded arms. This made Lin Sun more and more sure that Qin Yunyang must be very unpopular in his circle. Otherwise, how could he be so blatantly provoked and ridiculed? The affairs of my Green Turtle tribe have nothing to do with you. Qin Yunyang's face was extremely livid, and his eyes were about to crack. But in the end, he seemed to bear it and turned to Lin Sun. We are not welcome here. Let's go. While speaking, he transmitted his voice. Don't interfere in my affairs, lest your identity is exposed. In that case, even my old ancestor can't save you. Lin Sun was stunned. He didn't expect that Qin Yunyang was not only patient but also considerate of himself. Want to leave? It's not so easy. Wei Tsang's face darkened and his eyes became cold. If you dare to leave now, I dare to suppress you now and force you to kneel here. When Lan Tianqi comes, he will deal with you. This sentence was too threatening and full of humiliation. Qin Yunyang's face turned blue and white. His whole body was stiff, and the blue veins on his forehead were bulging. Obviously, he was extremely angry. As the Holy Son of Green Turtle Tribe, he was humiliated and threatened in public, which was a great shame. If it was spread out, it would be a great shame. Wei Tsang, you've gone too far. At this moment, Qin Yunyang's eyes were red. He was like a completely enraged beast, and his voice was a little hoarse. I've bullied you, so what? Don't expect the old ancestor of your Green Turtle tribe to save you. This is a matter of our younger generation. Even if your family knows it, I'm afraid they can't put down their dignity to save you. Wei Tsang sneered. Maybe when you are suppressed by me, your old ancestor will feel that you are too cowardly and abolish your position as the Holy Sun. What he said was true. In all the clans of South Sea, those big shots turned a blind eye to the grievances between the younger generation. They did this in order to better sharpen their descendants. If Qin Yunyang was suppressed and humiliated in public today, it would not only be a disgrace, but also a loss of his position as the Holy Sun. Qin Yunyang was completely stiff, and his face changed constantly. Lin Sun was wondering what kind of deep hatred made Wei Tsang humiliate Qin Yunyang like this. Killing someone was just a matter of nodding one's head to the ground. This was really going too far. Chapter 639. When they saw the aggrieved and furious expression on Qin Yunyang's face, a wave of roaring laughter resounded in the surroundings. Look, just one sentence from Wei Tsang is enough to scare our Green Turtle clan's Holy Sun into not daring to leave. Alas, the younger generation of the Green Turtle clan is getting worse and worse. There's a reason for this. 1,000 years ago, ancestor Qing Lai suddenly disappeared, and his whereabouts were unknown. Without such a life and death king, Green Turtle clan's power declined day by day. Even if ancestor Qing Lai has returned, it's impossible for Green Turtle clan to regain its former glory in a short period of time. No matter what, Qin Yunyang is too unbearable in the end. As a Holy Sun-level figure, when faced with humiliation and threats, he could only swallow it in silence and not dare to resist. It's simply too shameful. Various voices resounded in the hall, and there was ridicule and sighing, causing Qin Yunyang's expression to become even more unsightly and livid. He clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. His sullen yet stubbornly enduring appearance did not win him any sympathy. On the contrary, the more he acted like this, the more unbridled the ridicule and criticism became. Seeing this, Lin Sun frowned for a while. This guy was really patient. Let's go. In the end, Lin Sun couldn't stand it anymore. He sighed and looked at Qin Yunyang. The young outstanding talents of the various races in the hall were all startled. Who is this fellow? He actually dared to suddenly interfere at this time? Many people looked at Lin Sun suspiciously. They didn't know Lin Sun, but they didn't care. He was just a teenager who came with Qin Yunyang. How could he be a powerful figure? Who are you, brat? How dare he meddle in the affairs of Qin Yunyang? I advise you to sit down obediently. If you dare to say another word, I'll be the first to kill you. Wei Tsang's cold eyes swept over Lin Sun like a knife. He was somewhat angry. A youth at Qin Yunyang's side actually dared to jump out at this time. This was undoubtedly provoking his dignity. Qin Yunrod's expression changed abruptly, and he hurriedly transmitted his voice over. Lin Sun, don't interfere in my matters. If you let them see through your identity, we really won't be able to leave today. Lin Sun said calmly, You want to see through my identity? We have to ask them if they have the ability to do so. When he spoke up to hear, he sighed and reminded, Remember, blindly exercising forbearance will only allow your enemies to take a yard after taking an inch. Furthermore, with your attitude, if you don't change it, don't even think about stepping into the ranks of the truly strong in this lifetime. If you agree, then come with me now. Otherwise, you'll have to swallow your anger here and be mocked and humiliated by them. After that, Lin Sun didn't look at Qin Yunyang again. With his hands behind his back, he turned around and walked towards the outside of the hall. From the beginning to the end, he did not even look at anyone in the hall. His condescending attitude caused many experts' faces to darken. Qin Yunyang's expression changed indeterminately as he struggled intensely in his heart. But before he could make a decision, Wei Tsang couldn't bear it anymore. He had made it clear enough, but Lin Sun didn't care about his threat at all and treated him as nothing. This infuriated Wei Tsang. Brat, are you courting death? He said coldly. As he spoke, his figure flashed, and he raised his hand to strike directly at Lin Sun. His palm was powerful and blazing, making a thunderous roar. Boom! This palm was extremely domineering and ruthless, without any politeness. He intended to kill Lin Sun directly to establish his prestige. The people in the field suddenly became excited. All the young men and women of various clans showed a playful expression. For them, Lin Sun was just a teenager who followed Qin Yunyang here. His status and identity were certainly not worth mentioning. But it happened that such a teenager seemed to have more courage and backbone than Qin Yunyang. He chose to leave with a reckless attitude. This was obviously a provocation to Wei Tsang. Now Wei Tsang couldn't help but take the lead to launch an attack. Naturally, there would be a good show to watch. How dare you? Qin Yunyang roared. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore. At the moment when Wei Tsang launched an attack, he actually rushed to attack Lin Sun angrily. Boom! Surrounded by surging divine light, he stood in front of Lin Sun and collided with Wei Tsang head-on. A deafening collision sound spread along with it. Dang, dang, dang! Qin Yunyang was shaken back. His face turned blue and white, and his qi and blood were tumbling. Suddenly, there was a burst of laughter in the field. Everyone's expression became more and more playful. Qin Yunyang actually dared to launch an attack. This made all of them feel very fresh. Oh, you really dare to fight with me? Wei Tsang didn't smile, but his eyes were extremely cold and full of killing intent. He didn't expect that at this moment, Qin Yunyang, who was like a bully, dared to stand out to stop him. This is a friend I brought. It doesn't matter if I am bullied. But if you want to deal with him, you have to pass me first. Qin Yunyang roared. The blue veins on his neck stood out. His expression was a little ferocious, but his attitude was extremely resolute. Obviously, he was ready to risk everything. Hearing such cruel words, not only did the crowd not restrain themselves, but they all laughed with disdain and disapproval. Seeing this, Lin Sun also smiled. A touch of relief flashed through his black eyes. Qin Yunyang should do this, but it was far from enough. As a strong man, you should not only learn to resist, but also know how to fight back. Even if your strength is not as good as your opponent, you should let your opponent know that you are not so easy to bully. Lin Sun suddenly turned around. His eyes were cold and indifferent, like an abyss that made people palpitate. He looked at Wei Tsang and said in a calm and indifferent voice to Qin Yunyang. But at the same time, these words were also heard by everyone in the hall. They were all stunned and almost couldn't believe their ears. Was this teenager crazy? If Qin Yunyang didn't help him block Wei Tsang's attack just now, he would have died long ago. How could he have the chance to talk nonsense? Especially Wei Tsang, he was so angry that he laughed. He was provoked again and again by this teenager. Did he really think that Wei Tsang didn't dare to kill? Boy, don't think about leaving here alive today. Wei Tsang pointed at Lin Sun with a gloomy face. His attitude was arrogant and cold. Lin Sun ignored him and still said to Qin Yunyang, "In the struggle for the Tao, the brave come first. If you don't have such a state of mind, even if you are lucky to survive today, what about in the future? Every time you endure and give in, sooner or later, you will be ruthlessly eliminated on the road of Tao." Qin Yunyang stood there with his chest rising and falling rapidly. He was silent. "Hurry up, kill this man. I don't want to hear him clamor anymore." Someone shouted. "Damn it, teach Qin Yunyang a lesson in front of us. Don't pretend. Wei Tsang, if you don't do it, I will do it." Many strong men in the hall started to shout. Wei Tsang's face was extremely gloomy. He said coldly, "Don't worry, everyone. I will kill him right now and put his blood into the wine. Then, I will drink with you." Boom. Before his voice died away, he had already launched a brazen attack. His palm force was like thunder, wrapped in thousands of rays of light, and the power of Tao was pure and thick. It had to be said that Wei Tsang's strength was really extraordinary, and he obviously had rich combat experience. This strike of his was swift like a bolt of lightning and extraordinarily ruthless, and it was utterly impossible for an ordinary person to execute such might. This made the eyes of many strongmen in the hall brighten. They realized that Wei Tsang wanted to kill Lin Sun with the momentum of a thunderbolt to establish his prestige. Seeing this, Qin Yunyang was just about to take action, but he saw Lin Sun take a step forward before him this time. Lin Sun casually stretched out his palm and fingers casually. A cold curve appeared at the corner of Wei Tsang's mouth. This guy dared to fight with him. It seemed that he really couldn't wait to die, however. Just for a moment, the curve of his mouth froze, his pupils suddenly contracted, and an unspeakable sense of danger suddenly gushed out in his heart, making him feel cold all over as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This, before Wei Tsang could understand it, he felt a pain in his right arm. With a cracking sound, his flesh, tendons, and bones actually burst into pieces in an instant. A shrill scream came out of his mouth. He subconsciously wanted to retreat, but he saw a slender white hand had already patted on his shoulder. Bang! It was just like an extraterrestrial mountain pressing on his body. Wei Tsang was suppressed to kneel on the ground before he could struggle. His kneecap was broken, his whole body twitched, his cheeks were distorted because of the severe pain, and his shrill voice was extremely tragic. All this happened too fast. With one palm, Wei Tsang's right arm was destroyed, and he was suppressed to kneel on the ground, unable to struggle. All the people in the hall were shocked and stiff. Their original excited and playful expressions all froze there, and they were dumbfounded. This result made them somewhat unable to wrap their heads around it. One palm. Wei Tsang directly knelt down? Who dared to believe it? Although Wei Tsang's strength was not the top among the young men and women of all clans in the hall, he could at least be ranked in the top 10. Who could have imagined that he would actually be defeated by a young man, and in just a single strike? Even the holy son of the Black Phoenix clan, Kuya, who was sitting in the seat of honor, couldn't help palpitating and being shocked. He realized that they were all wrong. The teenager who followed Qin Yunyang was not an ordinary person at all, but a master. Even Qin Yunyang, who knew Lin Sun's identity, was shocked at the moment. He could imagine that Lin Sun, the young devil, was very strong, but he didn't expect that he could snatch it to such an outrageous extent. One blow and Wei Tsang knelt down. If it was spread out, it would set off a great uproar among the young generation of all clans in the South Sea. Slap! At this moment, Lin Sun was still indifferent as before, and he seemed to feel that Wei Tsang's shrill cries were too ear-piercing, so he flicked his finger from afar to knock Wei Tsang out. After that, he said to Qin Yunyang, "Now you've seen it, this fellow is only SOSO." His carefree attitude caused all the experts in the hall to feel angry and bewildered. Who exactly is this young man? Why have we never seen him before? Only Qin Yunyang had a complicated feeling in his heart. If he possessed a strength similar to Lin Sun, he would naturally not endure and be afraid. Your problem isn't the strength of your strength, but the problem of your mentality. Lin Sun glanced at Qin Yunyang and seemed to have seen through Qin Yunyang's thoughts. I understand. Qin Yunyang nodded. From the beginning until the end, Lin Sun had always been giving some sort of guidance to Qin Yunyang, and he took everyone in the hall to be nothing and paid no attention to them. It was even to the extent that even Wei Tsang, who was defeated and kneeling on the ground, seemed to be merely an example in his eyes, and he was used to prove it to Qin Yunyang. This sort of arrogant and willful attitude caused everyone, including Luo Ye, to arouse the feeling of being disregarded and humiliated. Chapter 640. How dare you? Who are you? How dare you behave atrociously here and treat us like we're nothing? You're truly lawless? Someone couldn't restrain himself and stood up angrily, scolding Lin. The expressions of the others were also unkind, and their eyes flickered. Lin Sun seemed as if he didn't notice, and he looked at Qin Yunyang as he said, "If you're a true expert, would you pay attention to the clamor of a fly?" The corners of Qin Yunyang's lips wriggled. He really wanted to say that this fellow wasn't a fly, but was called Lai Yunshan. Even though his strength couldn't be said to be terrifying, the ardent Crimson Bird clan behind him was an overlord amongst the various great clans and powers of the Southern Sea, and no one dared to rashly offend them. But in the face of Lin Sun's calm and cold eyes, Qin Yunyang finally gritted his teeth and didn't say much. He just said bluntly, "No." Lin Sun nodded. That's right. Lai Yunshan, who was regarded as a fly by Lin, was so angry that his face turned purple and his lungs were about to explode. When had he, a dignified figure of the Flamingo Bird clan, been humiliated like this before? No. Yet now, under the gazes of everyone present, a young man had bluntly taken him to be a lowly and ugly thing like a fly. How could Lai Yunshan tolerate this? Haha, do you really think that you can look down on everything and do whatever you want after defeating Wei Tsang? Lai Yunshan's voice was incomparably cold. I don't care who you are. If you don't kneel down and apologize to me today, not only you, but all your relatives and friends will die to atone for their crimes. The voice was cold and emotionless. Everyone in the hall revealed a cruel smile. In their opinion, Lai Yunshan was qualified to say that, because he was a descendant of the Flamingo Bird tribe. Just this identity alone was enough to convince people. This kid was finished. That was what everyone was thinking. Friend, perhaps you're very strong and have the qualifications to be arrogant. However, before us, you're nothing more than an ignorant man who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Right now, kneel down obediently and apologize, and perhaps you might be able to keep your life. A young girl spoke with a voice that revealed a strand of pride. No, just kneeling down and apologizing isn't enough. He injured Wei Tsang and ignored us. We must give him an unforgettable punishment to vent the hatred in our hearts. Where did this wild kid come from? So what if he's strong? Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you have some power? The others sneered as well. The scene where Lin Sun defeated Wei Tsang might make them palpitate and surprised, but in their view, no matter how powerful Lin Sun was, he was just a teenager without any background. Some clues could be seen from the fact that he was able to become friends with a character like Qin Yunyang. After all, which figure of a genuine peak power would become friends with Qin Yunyang? It was because of this judgment that they were so fearless and filled with a sense of superiority. However, Lin's reaction was beyond their expectation again. He was still very calm as he looked at Qin Yunyang and said, "How do you feel right now?" An indescribably complicated look appeared on Qin Yunyang's face. It seemed as if he had seen through everything and understood everything. He took a deep breath and said, "I've discovered that I used to be very ridiculous. I was actually mingling with these people. I was practically blind." Everyone's faces sank. These words weren't concealed at all. They were frank, which was equivalent to directly scolding them for being unbearable. "Qin Yunyang, do you understand the consequences of saying these words?" Lai Yunshan was enraged and threatened. Others also looked indifferent and cold. Did Qin Yunyang want to shed all pretenses of cordiality with them? But do you, Qin Yunyang, have the qualification to do so? You're simply courting death. A group of clowns who only know how to act like tyrants by relying on the power of their clans. I used to regard you as kindred spirits. Now I understand that in the eyes of the real strong, you are just a group of flies. You don't know the height of the sky and the depth of the vastness. How ridiculous! Qin Yunyang became more and more calm. His face was full of firmness, and his voice was sonorous and calm, as if he had become another person. He had metamorphosed. At least in terms of state of mind, there was a little more transformation than before. Lin Sun was keenly aware of this. What Qin Yunyang said was not important. What was important was the attitude behind his words. This was the key. If a strong man didn't have this kind of state of mind, he was doomed to have no great achievements in his life. Clowns, flies, when they heard these words coming from the mouth of Qin Yunyang, who had always been obedient to them, all the people present were a little stunned and couldn't believe it. Immediately, they became angry out of shame. How could a trash like Qin Yunyang dare to regard them as clowns and flies? This made them feel that their dignity had suffered an unprecedented provocation and blasphemy. "Qin Yunyang, I'll give you one last chance. Kneel down now and apologize to us, and I can pretend that nothing has happened. Otherwise," Lai Yunshan's voice seemed to be squeezed out from his teeth, and he pointed at Lin Sun, "otherwise you'll be like him. Don't even think about leaving today." "Really?" Lin Sun raised his head, and his eyes were as deep as an abyss as he looked coldly at Lai Yunshan. At that moment, Lai Yunshan's whole body inexplicably stiffened, and his heart trembled. He felt an unprecedented chill, and he felt as if he was stared at by a god of slaughter standing above the ninth heaven. How could a mere gaze be so terrifying? Boom! Before he could figure it out, he felt a blur before his eyes, and then Lin Sun had already appeared in front of him. Lin Sun's speed was so incredible that he had no time to react. "You also kneel down." A calm and indifferent voice sounded in his ears, but at this moment it was like a supreme decree, and it shocked Lai Yunshan to the point that even his soul trembled. "No!" He was just about to roar when he felt a hand pat on his shoulder, and then he felt pain all over his body. With a bang, under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Lin Sun merely patted Lai Yunshan lightly, and he was directly pressed to kneel on the ground like a straw. The ground was shaken to the point that it trembled, and many cracks appeared on its surface. The whole scene was silent, perfectly silent. That was Lai Yunshan, a noble descendant of the Flamingo Bird clan. Looking at the entire South Sea, perhaps even the experts of the top forces wouldn't dare to do this rashly. But now, the youngster practically didn't talk nonsense, and he didn't care about all this at all. He directly pressed Lai Yunshan to kneel on the ground. This was the greatest insult. If it was spread out, Lai Yunshan wouldn't be able to raise his head in this lifetime. The most frightening thing was that Lin Sun's speed was too fast. It seemed to be an understatement, but it was incomparably terrifying and beyond imagination. No matter if it was Wei Tsang before or Lai Yunshan now, they were almost suppressed by Lin Sun with a raise of his hand, and they didn't even have the ability to resist. This was too terrifying. Although everyone present was a figure of the younger generation, they were also the outstanding talents of the younger generation of the various clans. Perhaps they were a little domineering and arrogant, but there was indeed not a single weakling among them. Moreover, they were slightly stronger than ordinary experts. This was precisely where their confidence came from. But they simply couldn't imagine exactly what kind of terrifying power was needed to be like that youngster, to be able to settle the universe with a wave of his hand. That kind of transcendent and outstanding manner could only be possessed by people at the level of a supreme son of saint. But now it had appeared on a youngster. How could this not shock them? Even Qing Yunyang was shocked at this moment. But soon after, a wisp of fanaticism and yearning appeared in his eyes. If I also possessed this kind of power, who would dare to treat me lightly? At this moment, he yearned to become stronger even more. He saw a trace of a true expert's might from Lin Sun, and he realized that only by becoming stronger himself would he be able to obtain the respect of others, and only then would he be able to make his enemies fearful. Otherwise, if one didn't possess strength as a foundation, then all so-called relationships and circles would be like an illusion, a pavilion in the air. Just like how all the people in the hall were so arrogant earlier, yet now, before this young devil god Lin Sun, they were like laughable clowns. Strength. Qing Yunyang's eyes became even firmer. Friend, you're going a bit too far. Amidst this deathly silent atmosphere, Luoya, who sat at the seat of the host, spoke. His pupils were dim like ghost flames, and they flowed with a terrifying sheen. In the eyes of everyone, Luoya was a top expert whose strength was sufficient to be ranked in the top 30 of the younger generation of the South Sea. But in Lin Sun's opinion, it was nothing. You're unconvinced? Lin Sun's tone was flat, yet it seemed to be extremely domineering in the eyes of everyone present. Please provide me with your guidance. Luoya took a deep breath while blazing divine radiance surged into appearance from his entire body, and his might suddenly became extremely formidable. You're no good. Who else is unconvinced? Come at me together. Lin Sun's deep black eyes swept the surroundings. Everyone that was swept by his gaze trembled while their expressions were unsightly and stiff, and they didn't dare meet his gaze. This is the might of an expert, right? Qing Yunyang muttered in his heart, and the gaze he shot at Lin Sun carried a trace of reverence and admiration. Humph! Luoya grunted coldly, and he was already unable to tolerate it and attacked ferociously. Bang! He wasn't overwhelmed by rage, and he'd realized how strong Lin Sun was. So as soon as he attacked, he withdrew a golden spear that flowed with a bright glow and tore through the sky towards Lin Sun. The hall rumbled while space fell into disorder, and the ear-piercing howl was like a storm that caused the expressions of everyone present to turn pale while their vital blood roiled. There was utterly no need to doubt that Luoya had utilized his entire strength. Obviously, he'd taken Lin Sun to be a formidable enemy, and he hadn't held back at all. This strike of Luoya's could absolutely be said to be shocking, and it could be considered to be top amongst those at the same cultivation realm. If it was any other cultivator, that cultivator would probably not dare go head-on against it at all. But Lin Sun's reaction exceeded the expectations of everyone once more. He stood there without moving in the slightest. His tall and handsome figure was like a lofty mountain, and he'd merely stretched out his slender and fair hand before firmly grabbing onto the golden spear that struck towards him. This spear strike that could shatter mountains and annihilate yin and yang possessed extremely terrifying strength. But at the instant it was grabbed by Lin Sun, it was unable to move an inch forward. Not only that, the golden spear wailed and seemed to be slightly unable to endure it, and it caused the expressions of everyone present to change violently while their souls almost flew out of their bodies from terror. This was Luo Ya's full-force strike, yet it was suppressed so casually like this? Bang! Lin Sun's wrist shook, and he instantly seized the golden spear before sweeping it horizontally. A rumble resounded as Luo Ya's entire body was blasted flying, and he smashed open a hole in the wall over 30 m away, causing dust and smoke to suffuse the air. A single strike. Luo Ya, a top expert in the eyes of everyone, had countless bones in his entire body broken, and he'd suffered a crushing defeat on the spot. On the other hand, Lin Sun still stood towering on the spot without moving in the slightest. Only the golden spear that he held upside down had appeared in his hand, and his figure was alone while his dark eyes were cold, and he shocked everyone present. P.S. I received many messages of encouragement and consolation for Goldfish. Thank you, everyone. Currently, Goldfish's family has already made arrangements to take turns to accompany my grandfather in the hospital. Don't worry, everyone, I'll make the best use of my time to update and save more drafts in order to repay everyone's understanding and encouragement. I'll guarantee at least midnight tonight. Chapter 641. Luo Ya fell to the ground. His hair was disheveled, and he coughed up blood without end. His entire body convulsed in pain, but he stubbornly endured it. Compared to this pain, the fear in his heart was even more intense. Luo Ya was similarly unable to imagine that he would be like Wei Tsang and Lai Yunshan, unable to resist a single strike from that youth. It was too scary. When he recalled the events of the battle from before, Luo Ya felt as if he was dreaming. In the blink of an eye, he'd already lost. Even if Niu Tunshan, Meng Lianqing, and the others come, I'm afraid they won't be able to defeat me in a single move. Luo Ya's heart surged while he lost control of his emotions, and he felt an unprecedented sense of defeat. Exactly who is that fellow? The hall grew even more deathly silent. At this moment, these outstanding figures of the younger generation of the various races finally felt an unprecedented pressure. As they gazed at the young man that stood alone in the distance, their expressions became heavy, surprised, and bewildered, and it was even to the extent that they carried a wisp of deep fear. Wei Tsang was defeated, Lai Yunshan was defeated. At this moment, even Luo Ya had lost. Moreover, they were all defeated by a single strike. This seemed to be too terrifying and horrifying. Luo Ya could be said to be a top-rate existence in the heavenly insight realm, yet even he was unable to resist a single move from Chen Shi. So how terrifying would Chen Shi's combat strength be? Who else is unconvinced? Take this opportunity to stand out. Lin Sun's eyes were cold and calm. His voice was not loud, but it was full of absolute confidence and disdain, which made everyone present tremble and dare not speak. Before, they were arrogant and conceited, thinking highly of themselves. They thought that since Lin Sun was a friend of Qin Yunyang, he must be a nobody. Therefore, they had always despised Lin Sun. But now they were panic-stricken. They felt fear and threatened. They realized that the person they thought was not worth mentioning was actually a peerless figure who had been hiding his strength. This type of person had already stepped foot into the peak of the heavenly passage Great Tao. He could be said to be matchless, an existence that could stand shoulder to shoulder with those at the peerless divine child level. Even if he didn't have any monstrous power to rely on, he wasn't someone they could provoke. The entire place was silent, and no one dared to speak for a long time. Qin Yunyang saw all of this, and he was extremely excited in his heart. What was a true powerhouse? This was it. This kind of person, carrying the clouds and energy, transcending the blue underworld, soaring 90,000 li above. In comparison, the so-called outstanding talents of the various races present here were merely ants on the ground. They could only look up to them and revere them. The sound of footsteps came from outside the hall, and it was especially abrupt in this quiet atmosphere. What happened? A robust, burly, and ferocious young man strode over. He wore a scarlet-red cloak, had thick bones, a shiny bald head, and a pair of eyes that flowed with cold light. He was like a ferocious beast that emanated an oppressive and ferocious aura. Lan Tianji. The eyes of everyone present flickered as they recognized the identity of the newcomer. This was a ferocious figure that was even stronger than Luoya, and his combat strength was so formidable that it was sufficient to be ranked in the top 10 of the Southern Sea's younger generation. At the same time, he was also a top-notch saint. He was extremely cruel and ruthless, and he had a notorious reputation among the younger generation. Previously, the reason why Wei Tsang wanted to stop Qin Yunyang from leaving was because he wanted to wait for Lan Tianji to come. Everyone knew that there was enmity between Lan Tianji and Qin Yunyang that wasn't known to outsiders, and supposedly, it was caused by a woman. But no matter what, practically everyone in the younger generation of the Southern Sea was clearly aware that so long as Lan Tianji encountered him, Qin Yunyang would surely suffer a beating and humiliation. As for the specific reason, perhaps only the two of them knew. Now, Lan Tianji had come once more, and Qin Yunyang was present here. Would something similar to what they'd imagined in the past occur again? The gazes of everyone couldn't help but look towards the young man at the center of the hall, and when they saw his pair of deep and cold eyes, their entire bodies trembled while they went even more silent. This wasn't the time to watch the show. Why isn't anyone speaking? Lan Tianji frowned as he swept the hall with his gaze, and he noticed that the atmosphere was slightly strange. Let's go. Lin soon calculated the time and felt that the treasure auction ought to have ended at this moment. So he called out to Qin Yunyang before walking out of the hall. This caused everyone present to be stunned. He's leaving just like that? After that, all of them heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. It's good that he's leaving. If this fellow were to continue fighting, then I'm afraid all of us would suffer a calamity. Lan Tianji's face couldn't help but sink when he saw this. In the past, no matter where he went, he would be received like a host of stars surrounding the bright moon. But today was too unusual. Since he entered the hall, there were obviously so many familiar faces, yet all of them seemed as if they were mute, and from the beginning until the end, no one paid any attention to him. The thing that Lan Tianji was most unable to tolerate was that it was only an unfamiliar young man, yet he'd called out to Qin Yunyang and intended to leave. Undoubtedly, he'd been directly disregarded. This caused a fierce light to flash in Lan Tianji's eyes, and he shouted loudly right away. Qin Yunyang, fucking stop right there. His voice was like thunder that shook the soul. In the past, when Qin Yunyang was berated like this, he would surely be terrified to the point of stiffening on the spot and not daring to move. But this time, it exceeded Lan Tianji's expectations. Qin Yunyang seemed as if he hadn't heard it, and he didn't even spare a glance at Lan Tianji before turning around and leaving. You are courting death. Lan Tianji was thoroughly furious. Originally, his temperament was extremely fierce and brutal. At this moment, he'd been successively disregarded by everyone in the hall, Lin Sun and Qin Yunyang, as if they'd treated him as air. How could he not be furious? Boom! Amidst the violent shout, Lan Tianji stretched out his hand and grabbed. A ball of deep and resplendent thunderstorm and lightning arcs emerged, turning into a big hand that fiercely grabbed towards Qin Yunyang. As a proud son of heaven who could be ranked among the top holy sons, this strike of Lan Tianji was naturally extraordinary. And because he'd attacked with fury, his strength was even more terrifying. But to Lan Tianji's surprise, when they noticed that he'd made a move, the reactions of the other people present seemed to be different from the past. There was no excitement or cheering, no expectation or excitement, but a complicated and strange feeling, as if they couldn't bear to do it. What the hell was going on today? Before he could figure it out, Lan Tianji noticed that at the same time he'd made a move, the young man who was walking towards the outside of the hall suddenly turned around. Boom! Immediately, A slender and fair palm appeared out of thin air, and with a light pinch, it crushed the big thunderstorm hand that he'd released. Huh? Does all this have something to do with this young man? Lan Tianji's pupils suddenly shrank. He was not an idiot, so he keenly perceived the key at the first time. Do you have any problem with me taking him away? Lin Sun asked. He didn't know Lan Tianji, nor did he know the grievances between Lan Tianji and Qin Yunyang, but he didn't care about it. He was about to return to Xiao Empire, so he naturally wouldn't care who he'd offended at this time. Ho ho, where did this wild boy come from? How dare you talk to me like this? Lan Tianji was furious, but his face became more and more gloomy. The fierce killing intent in his eyes was fully revealed, and his momentum was overwhelming. Boom! Lan Tianji was really overbearing. As soon as he finished his words, he directly took action and slapped towards Lin Sun. Lin Sun's figure flashed, and he dodged it lightly. Then he said, "It's not suitable for fighting here. It's better for us to fight 3 times to determine the winner. If I lose, you can do whatever you want to me. If you lose..." Speaking of this, Lin Sun looked at Qin Yunyang and continued, "If you lose, you should kneel down and kowtow to him 3 times. How about that?" As soon as these words came out, Lan Tianji's eyes couldn't help but narrow, and he began to look Lin Sun up and down carefully. This young man was too confident, and he couldn't see through Lin Sun's strength. This made him realize something was wrong. "Brother Lan, this person has just defeated Wei Tsang, Lai Yunshin, and Luo Ye, and he's done it with a single strike. You should be careful." Finally, someone forcefully restrained the fear in his heart and reminded Lin Sun in a low voice. Lan Tianji was shocked in his heart, and his expression changed slightly. Wei Tsang and Lai Yunshin were nothing. What really shocked him was that even a figure like Luo Ye was actually defeated in a single strike. This made him have no choice but to be moved and not dare to be negligent any longer. "Ho ho, I thought you, Qin Yunyang, had some ability. It turns out that you've found an expert to help you." Lan Tianji sneered, and his eyes were like knives as he glanced at Qin Yunyang, and they were full of contempt and coldness. However, Qin Yunyang's expression was calm, and he said firmly, "No matter what you think, I just want to tell you this time that I'll kill you with my own hands 10 years later." Lan Tianji frowned. It's too strange. In the past, Qin Yunyang was simply like a cowardly tortoise that only knew how to swallow insults and humiliation, and he was extremely cowardly. But today, he seemed to have become a different person. Could it be that it's all because of that youth? Lan Tianji paid no attention to Qin Yunyang's so-called battle in 10 years, as he was extremely disdainful of it. What he really attached importance to was that youth. 3 strikes? Are you sure? Lan Tianji's eyes flickered and surged with a ghastly cold light as he stared at Lin Sun. "I'm asking you if you dare or not." Lin Sun's expression remained unchanged. "All right." A loud shout was simply like a thunderclap that caused one's heart to tremble. At this instant, Lan Tianji had already launched a brazen attack. Rumble! Terrifying lightning surged all over his body, and his eyes emitted lightning, and he'd completely released the might of a peerless holy sun. At this instant, it was as if a peerless ferocious beast had awakened in his body, and the ferocious aura caused the entire hall to tremble. Everyone's expression changed in unison. So strong. Obviously, Lan Tianji also realized Lin Sun's strength, so he didn't dare to be careless. He intended to exert all his strength to suppress Lin Sun within these 3 strikes. However, Lin Sun was still calm and tranquil, standing there, aloof and extraordinary. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the battle began. Boom! In the first strike, Lan Tianji displayed a secret method with great momentum. His palm struck out, which shocked all the people present. They recognized that this was a secret unique skill with boundless horror. But Lin Sun resolved all this with just one palm. He stood there casually and calmly, without a trace of wavering. This also made people feel cold in their hearts. How could the all-out strike of a peerless holy sun be resolved like this? Chapter 642. This guy was very strong. Lan Tianqi was able to become a top saint, so he naturally had rich battle experience. Just one strike was enough to let him realize that this opponent was somewhat difficult to deal with. However, he couldn't figure out when such a powerful figure had appeared among the major forces of the Southern Sea. Why had he never heard of him before? However, Lan Tianqi didn't have time to think. In the second strike, he took out his own weapon. It was a saber surrounded by silver lightning arcs. Thunder-devouring saber. It was a powerful ancient treasure imprinted with the power of silver spirit battle thunder. It was filled with a destructive aura. Even in the Southern Sea, this saber was famous. It was because it was an ancestral weapon of Lan Tianqi's clan. It was rumored that in ancient times, this saber had been stained with the blood of a true saint. Its power was immeasurable. Lan Tianqi is using a secret treasure. Everyone in the hall was shocked. They realized that Lan Tianqi had obviously realized how terrifying this young man was. He was treating him as his #1 enemy. What was more incredible was that even so, Lin Sun was still barehanded. Could he be so confident that he could fight against Lan Tianqi without using a treasure? Everyone's hearts trembled. They didn't know that Lin Sun was also barehanded when he defeated Niu Tunshin and the others in the ancient dojo of the Demon Saint's secret realm. At that time, Lin Sun was only at the great perfection of the initial stage of the Grotto Heaven realm. Now, he had already entered the middle stage of the Grotto Heaven realm. His overall strength had undergone another transformation, and he couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before. Thunder rush roar! Lan Tianqi shouted. His voice was like spring thunder. A saber radiance swept through the air. With a ripping sound, the void was shattered. A dazzling saber radiance appeared out of nowhere. In an instant, it was as if a bolt of tribulation thunder had descended from the sky to destroy the world. That terrifying aura made everyone's scalp go numb. They almost stopped breathing. It was too terrifying. If this attack was aimed at them, they wouldn't know how to dodge it. Even Qin Yunyang, who was extremely confident in Lin Sun, couldn't remain calm at this moment. He knew Lan Tianqi very well. Although this person was cruel and ruthless, his combat strength could be said to be swift and terrifying. Moreover, as a top-notch holy son, he was a ruthless character in the entire Southern Sea who struck fear into the hearts of his peers. But now, he was attacking with all his strength, summoning his artifact and using his secret technique. That kind of domineering and boundlessly domineering posture was something that no one could remain calm about. As for Lin Sun, could he stop it? Bang! However, Lin Sun's black hair fluttered in the wind, and his expression was calm and tranquil. In the face of such a terrible blow, he didn't even make a move, but just took a step forward. One step. However, an impassioned dragon roar resounded. A lifelike snow-white ice serpent appeared. It raised its head high into the sky and emitted an indescribable aura of desolation. This scene was like the appearance of a true ancient divine beast. It was dazzling like snow, and it carried a dignified and indifferent aura of looking down upon all living beings. At that instant, the expressions of everyone present turned ghastly pale while their hearts palpitated with unease, and all of them were awed by the aura emitted by the ice dragon. Moo! The dragon's roar was like a howl as the ice dragon soared into the sky. Its body that was graceful like ice and snow coiled around, easily shattering the lightning saber shadows that covered the sky and transforming them into a rain of light that filled the sky. Bang! At the same time, Lan Tianqi seemed as if he was struck by lightning. His body trembled, and the space between his thumb and index finger shook violently. The thunderous saber buzzed incessantly, and it almost flew out of his hand. In an instant, Lan Tianqi's expression changed, and it was unprecedentedly solemn. This was an unprecedented great enemy among his peers. Since he started cultivating, he had fought with many supreme saints, but he hadn't encountered anyone as terrifying as the young man in front of him. This fellow was like an abyss, unfathomable, and frightening. Facing him was like facing a king. Although his power was indifferent, his strength was unfathomable. Looking at the others in the field, they were all stunned like clay sculptures. Even Luoya, Wei Tsang, and Lai Yunshin, who had been defeated by Lin Sun, were shocked there, and there was great terror in their hearts. Only now did they realize that even if they were defeated by a single move in the battle with Lin Sun just now, Lin Sun still held back too much strength. If Lin Sun didn't hold back at that time, when they thought up to here, their entire bodies shuddered because the consequences would be too severe, and they didn't dare continue thinking about it. No wonder, no matter if it's those old fellows or those extraordinary figures of the younger generation, all of them call him the young devil god. Qin Yunyang clenched his fists tightly in secret, and he was shocked and excited in his heart. An expert. This is a true expert. No matter how many techniques or secret techniques you possess, I'll break through all of them with my own strength. I only have one final strike left, and I won't hold back any longer. Lan Tianji took a deep breath, and his eyes were filled with resolution and madness. His imposing aura changed abruptly like a storm that rose steadily, and it grew stronger and more terrifying. His entire body was covered in lightning that surged like lava, and it was dazzling and resplendent to the point others didn't dare look at him directly. Bang! Along with a rumble, everyone acutely noticed at the first possible moment that Lan Tianji had advanced. At this moment, he'd actually stepped into the heavenly insight realm from the intermediate stage of the heavenly insight realm, and his overall strength had obtained a completely new improvement. I, Lan Tianji, have been sharpening my Taoist foundation and suppressing my realm every day since I started my cultivation, in order to strive for a perfect path of the Tao in the future. And today you're very lucky to have personally witnessed a small change in me on this path. Lan Tianji's expression was grim and cold, and his eyes were flowing with thunderstorm. His imposing aura shocked the hall, making everyone feel depressed and suffocated. However, you're also unfortunate. The third strike will determine the winner, and you are doomed to die under my Tao. The cold and murderous voice reverberated in the hall. Lan Tianji's expression was rarely calm, but there was an absolute disdain that had never been seen before. This was the demeanor of a top saint, and their invincible belief in their own Tao, which was also a common characteristic of the real strong. Perhaps their characters were different, and their style of doing things was different. However, all of them possessed extraordinary persistence and confidence towards their paths towards the Tao. Everyone's heart trembled, and they were all awed and convinced. If you can block my blow, it's not too late to say that. A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. Until this moment, he had an interest in fighting, and the fighting saint method quietly ran. Boom! This time, Lin Sun took the lead and punched out. It was simple, direct, and ordinary, but it had a kind of power that could penetrate through time and space and shake the world. This was the most essential mystery of fighting, which was integrated into the essence of 9 strikes for shaking heaven. It was like a butcher dismembering an ox. The essence had reached an extreme state of returning to the original state. The great sound was silent, and the elephant was invisible. This punch was the same as well. It didn't have a blazing and gorgeous scene, nor did it cause a world-shocking commotion. However, when he punched out, the void was like a canvas that was fiercely crushed into pieces. Everything before everyone's eyes seemed to be falling apart and falling into destruction. Only a single fist seemed eternal, and it filled everyone's eyes. Everyone's soul was completely submerged by the power of this punch. They could no longer see anything and felt a strong breath of death. They were just bystanders. The target of this punch was not them at all, but it had caused such a great impact on them. It could be imagined how terrible this punch was. Lan Tianji's face also changed, and his mind was shaken. He thought that after his promotion, he could suppress Lin Sun with an absolute posture. But when facing this punch, he found that he was wrong, extremely wrong. All the hairs on his body stood on end. This was an instinctive reaction, an intuition towards danger. It was even to the extent that his soul, will to fight, and state of mind were all affected. For the first time in his life, he had a strong impulse to avoid this punch and only wanted to escape. Was this still the power that a practitioner of Tao Insight realm could exert? All this took a long time to describe, but in fact it happened so fast that Lan Tianji didn't dare to think about it. This was the third blow. According to the agreement, the winner should be decided. How could he retreat? Kill! Lan Tianji roared. Every time his strength was mobilized, he gathered all of it in a way that was almost self-damaging, and then he chopped out. For a moment, Lan Tianji had a feeling of being drained. He knew that this blow was too fierce. Even if he could win in the end, his body would be damaged to a certain extent. But as long as he could defeat Lin Sun, it was all worth it. However, when this blow really collided, Lan Tianji found that he was wrong after all. Boom! Divine radiance erupted while his fist shook the world. All the furnishings in this hall rumbled as they were blasted into powder. Many nearby experts weren't able to dodge in time, so they were affected by this attack and were blasted flying while letting out shrill cries. That scene was like a storm, which made the whole hall a mess. Plop! When all the rumbling stopped, when the mist dispersed, Lan Tianji's body was like a mountain that couldn't bear the weight of a heavy mountain, and he suddenly collapsed and knelt on the ground. He coughed up blood and his skin was trembling. His face was so pale that it was almost transparent. He was extremely weak and showed signs of being seriously injured and dying. Everyone's eyes widened, and they clenched their teeth tightly. One punch. Lan Tianji, the great saint, was completely suppressed. Looking at Lin Sun, he stood alone, his clothes were spotless, and his black eyes were cold and calm. His transcendent posture was like a king overlooking everything. I actually lost, Lan Tianji said in a hoarse voice, as if he couldn't accept it. He knelt down facing Qin Yunyang. All of a sudden, there was only darkness in front of him. Who are you? Why are you so powerful? After a long time, Lan Tianji struggled to look up at Lin Sun, only to find that the hall had long been empty. The young man and Qin Yunyang had already left. I don't even know your name. I lost, really miserably. Lan Tianji laughed at himself, and his voice was full of loss and disappointment. All the people in the hall were silent, and their expressions were uncertain. They couldn't calm down their emotions. Looking at Lan Tianji, they couldn't help but feel sad for him. He was a top-notch saint, so glorious and dazzling. But now, he was in such a pitiful state that it moved one's countenance. And all this was because of one punch. Who was that young man? Chapter 643. The bustling Cloud Ping Bazaar was still in full swing. Lin Sun and Qin Yunyang shuttled through the bustling crowd. They seemed to be moving slowly, but in fact, they were rushing out of Cloud Ping Island at a very fast speed. Although those guys are a little arrogant, they are not stupid. I'm afraid it won't be long before they figure out my identity. Are you afraid now? Lin Sun asked Qin Yunyang secretly as he moved forward. If they know that you have something to do with me, the consequences will be unpredictable. I'm not afraid. Qin Yunyang's expression was calm. Although my Green Turtle clan has declined, it is not something that anyone can bully. Moreover, my ancestor Qing Lai has returned. With him here, anyone who wants to deal with us will have to think twice. He took a deep breath, his eyes full of determination. After returning to the tribe, I will do closed-door training. Within 10 years, I must become a real expert. Qin Yunyang had indeed changed. His mentality was different from before, and he had a firm and persistent belief. As the saying goes, the strong must strengthen themselves. With this mentality, Lin soon believed that Qin Yunyang would inevitably brave the wind and waves on his own path. Lin soon saw all this and couldn't help but nod secretly. It was not too late for him to realize this. "What about you? Aren't you worried?" Qin Yunyang suddenly asked. It should be noted that Lin Sun was absolutely a hated character in South Sea. Once his identity was exposed, the consequences would be terrible and unimaginable. "If everything goes well, I will leave today." Lin Sun smiled and didn't care at all. "You can stay in my green turtle tribe. I believe that with Ancestor Qing Lai's protection, you can at least avoid some killing," Qin Yunyang suggested. "No need." Lin Sun shook his head. As they talked, they left Cloud Pung Island and came to the back of the giant green turtle, where the experts of Green Turtle Tribe were. "Old Toad, how is it?" As soon as he arrived, Lin Sun saw Old Toad waiting there. Today, Old Toad followed Ancestor Qing Lai to participate in the treasure auction. They had already agreed that as soon as they bought the vast universe arc, they would immediately set off and return to Xiao Empire through South Sea. Old Toad suddenly sighed and frowned. Something unexpected happened. "What?" Lin soon narrowed his eyes. "What happened?" "Motherf asterisk cur, just thinking about it makes this king want to kill someone." Old Toad had a gloomy expression on its face. When this matter was brought up, it still stomped its feet in anger and let loose a torrent of abuse. It turned out that during the treasure competition, the Old Toad and Ancestor Qing Lai were determined to obtain the vast universe arc, and they'd forcefully placed an astronomical price on it, causing all the other great figures to be defeated and not dare compete with them. Who would have thought that at the final moment when the hammer fell, someone would suddenly intervene and directly bid for the vast universe arc at twice the price of Old Toad and the others. Old Toad couldn't be blamed for being so angry when it saw the cooked duck fly away. Originally, this king and big brother Qinglai were both very angry. "We thought that we might as well kill them and steal their treasures, snatching away that vast universe Arkansas." Old Toad was clearly very excited. Who would have thought that by the time the treasure auction ended, that guy would have already fled without a trace? He's simply more cunning than a fox. After hearing this, Lin Sun was speechless for a while. This was really full of twists and turns. "Where is Brother Qinglai?" Lin Sun asked. "He was summoned by a group of great figures to discuss some matters," the Old Toad answered casually. Old Toad answered casually. Saying this, his expression suddenly changed and he smacked his forehead. "This king almost forgot something important." "What important thing?" Lin Sun frowned. "It's about you." The Old Toad's expression was solemn and a trace of worry appeared between his brows. He transmitted his voice to Lin Sun. "Although this treasure auction is unprecedentedly grand and has attracted many great figures from various clans to participate, do you know what their real purpose is?" Without waiting for Lin Sun to answer, he said, "It's to deal with you." Lin Sun's heart shook fiercely. "Deal with me?" "That's right. I don't know which old fart used a secret method to calculate that you haven't left the South Sea yet, so the great figures of various clans can't stay calm anymore. They heard the news and came here. They want to join forces and set up an inescapable net to capture and kill you." Lin Sun's black eyes surged as he fell into silence. "Don't doubt it. Now in the South Sea, almost everyone knows that you've obtained the greatest fortune in the Demon Saint's secret realm, which is related to the true inheritance of the divine way. Do you think those life and death realm kings will be willing to watch you leave?" Seeing Lin Sun remain silent, the Old Toad became anxious. "I really didn't expect that the life and death realm kings would join forces to deal with a Tao Insight realm practitioner like me. They really think highly of me." Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and sighed softly. Previously, Luo Ye and the other outstanding figures of the younger generation of various clans gathered together to discuss how to deal with him. Lin Sun wasn't surprised by this and didn't even take it to heart. But now it was different. This was a group of old monsters joining forces to target the great fortune he had. They couldn't allow him to leave the South Sea alive. Under such circumstances, even Lin Sun's heart couldn't help but become heavy. The worst thing was that even the vast universe arc had been taken by others. Are they really going to force me to cross the soul oblivion sea directly? Lin Sun was lost in thought. It was unknown how many nautical miles they had to cross to return to the Forbidden City from here, and the journey was full of unpredictable natural disasters and dangers. Without a life-and-death realm king to carry them, they would absolutely die. For example, when Lin Sun and Zhao Jingxian came together, it was thanks to Elder Gao Yang's ample preparations that they were able to safely reach the outside of the ultimate ruins. But now it was different. Only Lin Sun and the old toad were left. With their current strength, crossing the soul oblivion sea was no different from courting death. It's all that bastard who snatched the vast universe arc from us. Don't let me know who he is, or I'll kill him. The old toad gnashed its teeth fiercely. Who do you want to kill? At this moment, a clear and melodious voice like a wind chime suddenly rang out. Accompanying this voice was a graceful and ethereal figure that walked on the waves from afar. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, her bearing was graceful, and her jet-black and beautiful hair fluttered in the sea breeze. She was like a celestial maiden that had walked out of a painting. It's that demoness! Lin Sun and the old toad recognized at a glance that it was Ahu. Dressed in a light yellow dress, she stood on the blue sea. Her skin was like ice and her bones were like jade. Her eyes were big and intelligent, and her whole body exuded a kind of holy and glamorous beauty. Her appearance was breathtaking. It's her! At this moment, Qin Yunyang's face also changed slightly, revealing a complicated expression. There was hatred, bitterness, and sadness. Only then did Lin Sun remember that Wu Shang once said that it was Ahu who stole the treasure of their green turtle tribe, Thousand Chance Banner, so they chased after her all the way. But Lin Sun didn't expect that Ahu would appear here and take the initiative to come to the territory occupied by the strong of the green turtle tribe. This chick was really bold. Lin Sun glanced at Qin Yunyang, but to his surprise, he found that Qin Yunyang had calmed down at the moment and didn't take any drastic action. However, the strong of the green turtle tribe nearby were all angry and murderous, and their eyes were locked on Ahu. Perhaps as long as Qin Yunyang gave the order, they would absolutely attack without hesitation. But Qin Yunyang didn't do so. Instead, he sighed softly and waved his hand. Don't move, let her come over. This caused the experts of the Green Turtle clan to be slightly puzzled, surprised, and bewildered. Child Yunyang, we meet again. Ahu smiled sweetly, and her beautiful eyes were flowing with clear waves. She floated over like a fairy, attracting the attention of the whole audience. What are you doing here? Isn't it enough to take away the Thousand Chance Banner? Do you want to harm my Green Turtle tribe? Qin Yunyang said in a low voice. Ahu frowned her delicate eyebrows and then said with a smile, I originally wanted to leave, but I have to do one thing. What is it? Qin Yunyang frowned. Ahu smiled slightly, looked at the old toad, and said in a clear voice, Hey, did you just say you wanted to kill me? The old toad was stunned, and then immediately understood. He said angrily, So it was you who took away our vast universe arc. Ahu giggled. What do you mean by yours? I got this thing from a treasure auction, so it belongs to me. Don't twist words and force logic. At this time, Lin Sun opened his mouth. His black eyes stared at the girl of mysterious origin and behavior, and he said, Miss Ahu, you didn't come especially for us, did you? Qin Yunyang's eyes narrowed. She came for Lin Sun? Sure enough, Ahu snapped her fingers and smiled like a beautiful and charming little fox. She said, Smart. You guessed it. It's amazing. Although I don't know your intentions, I don't have time to deal with you now. Why don't we talk more directly? Lin Sun also smiled, his black eyes deep. This is too much of a waste of time. You just come with me and I will have a good talk with you on the way. Ahu smiled even more brilliantly. Her skin was sparkling and translucent, her teeth snow-white, and her graceful and slender body was shrouded in a dreamy luster under the sunlight. She was incomparably beautiful. Go with you? Do you really think that just because you're beautiful, this king will be charmed by your stinky skin and foolishly follow you? The old toad's face was full of disdain. Ahu's smile vanished. Her clear eyes were clear as she said seriously, I have the vast universe arc in my hands, and you're about to face imminent disaster. If you don't go with me, do you have any other choice? As soon as she said this, Lin Sun and the old toad's pupils shrank in shock as they realized a problem. This mysterious girl called Ahu actually seemed to know their situation like the back of her hand. Who on earth was she? Ahu curled her lip and said, If you don't go, then I'll leave. Then I'll thank you in advance, miss. Lin Sun almost didn't even think about it before he happily agreed. The old toad shouted angrily, Damn, you brat can't really be charmed by her, right? What if she's an enemy? Are you afraid? Asked Lin Sun. What a joke. Why would this king be afraid of a little girl? The old toad said disdainfully. Then what's there to be afraid of if you go with her? Lin Sun continued to ask. The old toad finally realized that Lin Sun wasn't joking, but was serious. It was also at this time that Qin Yunyang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened his mouth and said, You too, if you trust me, I suggest that you go with her. Lin Sun and the old toad were startled. Never in a million years had they imagined that Qin Yunyang would actually speak up for Ahu. Even Ahu seemed a little surprised. She took a deep look at Qin Yunyang and finally said with a smile, Child Yunyang, I really didn't misjudge you. I don't need you to judge right or wrong. I only hope that you never appear in front of me again in this life. Qin Yunyang was expressionless. Ahu smiled and didn't say anything more. In the end, Lin Sun and the old toad followed Ahu and floated away. Before leaving, Lin Sun left behind a storage pouch and gave it to Qin Yunyang. He said, Destroy the things inside after you've seen them. I hope they can help you. Chapter 644. Qin Yunyang only withdrew his gaze after he watched Lin Sun and the others leave. He was in a daze when he recalled everything he'd experienced today. So, he really is that young devil god that caused an uproar in the entire South Sea. After a short while, Qin Yunyang's heart calmed down, and he became unprecedentedly firm. Lin Sun allowed him to see the path of a true expert, and he realized that his performance in the past was too unbearable and insufficient. To think that I'm the holy son of the Green Turtle Clan. Who would have imagined that I'm just a frog at the bottom of a well? From today onward, I'll strengthen myself, abandon everything, and focus on my grand Tao. Qin Yunyang took a deep breath while his gaze became clear, and the change in his state of mind caused his entire bearing to seem different. The nearby attendants of the Green Turtle Clan acutely noticed that their holy son seemed to have become a completely different person. His bearing was calm and composed, and it caused them to be surprised in their hearts. Right, I wonder what Lin Sun left behind for me. Qin Yunyang thought in his heart, and he turned around and walked into the ninth heaven white jade pavilion before carefully opening the storage pouch given to him by Lin Sun. After a short moment, Qin Yunyang seemed as if he'd been struck by lightning, and he stiffened on the spot while his chest rose and fell indeterminately, and his expression became extremely colorful. There was shock, there was ecstasy, and there was a sense of gratitude that came from the bottom of their hearts. The things within the storage pouch were very simple, and they were a few scriptures. There was the Bloodlion clan's Panwu scripture, the Dragon Whale clan's Freedom Swallowing technique, the Herculean Ox clan's Nether Thunderblast Precious technique, the Cloud Monkey clan's Six Armor Devil Seal scripture. Every single one of these scriptures could be said to be unparalleled and possessed boundless profundities. They were supreme secret techniques of the various clans, and they contained the profundities of the Grand Tao. Their value was unimaginably great. If news of this were to spread, the entire South Sea would be shaken and give rise to monstrous waves. It's no wonder that those great figures disregarded their identities and joined forces to pursue and kill him. No matter who it was, they would probably be unable to tolerate the supreme secret techniques of their clans being leaked. Qin Yunyang had an emotional expression, and he was even more shocked by how terrifying Lin Sun was. Forcefully seizing the supreme secret techniques of numerous clans wasn't something that just anyone could accomplish. If I'm able to see through the profundities of these scriptures, then I'll absolutely be able to occupy the greatest advantage when fighting the experts of the Bloodlion clan, Dragon Whale clan, Herculean Ox clan. Because I've already seen through the intrinsic secrets of their cultivation. Perhaps this is the purpose of Lin Sun giving me these scriptures. Qin Yunyang's heart was in turmoil. Finally, he looked through the window at the blue sea in the distance and murmured, "Lin Sun, thanks a lot. When the true great era comes, I will fight alongside you on the great Tao." Drunken Wind Pavilion, 9th floor. The huge hall was in a mess. Lan Tianqi, Luo Ye, and all the other outstanding geniuses of the younger generation had gloomy expressions as they sat cross-legged there. Although Lin Sun and Qin Yunyang had left, not a single one of them was able to calm down. When they thought of everything that had just occurred, their hearts trembled with fear, and there was even a type of indescribable shame. I don't think there's such a person among the Southern CC's Paradise Realm top holy sons, is there? Who do you think that guy is? Luo Ye's low voice broke this deathly silent atmosphere. Everyone looked at each other. If I'm not wrong, then that young man has probably already stepped onto the strongest and peerless path towards the Tao of Legend. In the end, Lan Tianqi spoke. He took a deep breath while his expression changed indeterminately. This sort of realm is called the King Realm. He's like a supreme king amongst his peers that stands proudly at the peak of all mountains, and he's said to be invincible amongst his peers. Only a peak figure that has similarly attained the king realm is capable of going against him. Besides this figure, all other cultivators are unable to go against him. Kings look down upon a realm like divine dragons in the sky. During the primeval times, they were reputed to be supreme geniuses that were capable of suppressing an entire realm and sweeping through all. Even if it was during the primeval times, such a figure could be said to be peerless. When these words were spoken by a top figure like Lan Tianqi, it was simply like a thunderclap, and it caused everyone present to go perfectly silent and fall into shock. That young man from before was actually a supreme king that stood at the Paradise Realm? He's capable of suppressing an entire realm and sweeping through all his peers? This was simply like an ethereal legend that was filled with unbelievable colors, and it practically caused everyone to not dare believe it. Is there really such a peerless figure in this world? Someone spoke with a trembling voice. There is. Lan Tianqi's reply was resolute and forceful, and a wisp of recollection flashed within his eyes. A few years ago, I once followed the seniors of my clan to pay a visit to the Heavenly Pivot holy grounds in the ancient Desolation region. It was there that I heard some rumors about supreme geniuses. What I can be sure of is that there are peerless figures that are monstrous geniuses amongst the great powers that have been passed down since the primeval times in the ancient Desolation region. For example, the disciple of the Heavenly Sword sect that's reputed to be the #1 sword cultivator of the younger generation that's renowned throughout the ancient Desolation region, Yun Qinbai, was reputed to be an invincible supreme king when he was at the Paradise Realm. Yun Qinbai. The expressions of many people present here changed slightly when they heard this name. Obviously, they'd heard some rumors about this person. Amidst the expanse of shock, Luo Ye's expression went grim, and he cried out involuntarily. Could it be that young man from before is such a king? Lan Tianqi said in a low voice. He was able to defeat me within 3 strikes and cause me to be utterly unable to resist. Even if a person like this isn't a king, he surpasses a king. Everyone suddenly realized that Lan Tianqi was a peerless holy son, and he was almost at the peak of the paradise realm. However, he had indeed been utterly defeated and suppressed by that young man with a single punch. There was probably no one in the entire South Sea who could achieve such a feat. Then, where did this young man come from? Why had they never heard of his strength that was comparable to a king of the paradise realm before? I remember now. So it's him. At this moment, someone shouted loudly. That young demon god! Young demon god! When everyone, including Lan Tianqi, heard this title, their hearts shook fiercely, and their expressions changed drastically. Yes, it's definitely that young demon god. We guessed wrongly just now. He's not an expert of our South Sea at all. He's a human cultivator that came with the spirit treasure Holy Land. That's right. Only that young demon god could possess such terrifying strength. After all, according to the rumors, even Niu Tunshan and the other 3 peerless holy sons were no match for this fellow even if they joined forces. It's obvious how ferocious he is. So it's him. No wonder he was able to suppress Wei Tsang, Lai Yunshan, and Luoyou with a single strike. Instantly, everyone came to their senses. They'd guessed Lin Sun's identity, and their expressions became extremely complicated. Earlier, they'd been discussing about joining forces to search for the young demon god. They'd never imagined that such a peerlessly ferocious fellow would actually be right under their noses. When they thought of this, they felt a chill run down their spines. If that young demon god had started a massacre, then the consequences would be unimaginable. What are all of you standing there for? Quickly notify all the seniors to kill that young demon god. Lan Tianqi roared loudly. His words caused everyone to suddenly come to their senses. Right, that young demon god had actually appeared in the Canopy Cloud Bazaar. This was a rare opportunity. Let's go. No matter what, we can't let him escape this time. Quickly notify the ancestor. That great fortune is right in front of us. In the uproar, these young men and women rushed out of the Drunken Wind Pavilion like madmen. They were anxious to be the first to be one step behind. That was a young demon god, and he had a great opportunity that came from the demonic saint mystic realm. Whoever could kill him first would be able to obtain this opportunity. Before long, the entire Canopy Cloud Bazaar was completely stirred. Practitioners from all clans were shocked to find that many life and death realm experts appeared out of thin air. Their murderous aura was so terrifying that even the sky and the earth changed color. What on earth happened? Every area of the Canopy Cloud Island was in shock. Soon, a piece of news spread like a storm. The young demon god has appeared. He's on the Canopy Cloud Island. All of a sudden, when the experts of all clans heard the news, they all became excited. In the current Southern Sea realm, there was no one who didn't know of a young devil god from the human race who had once displayed great divine might in the demon saint's secret realm. He had rampaged through the heavens and the earth, slaughtering all the experts of the various races and causing rivers of blood to flow. The most terrifying thing was that even the top saints like Niu Tunshan, Meng Lianqing, Kong Xiu, and Xian Luozi had been defeated by that young demon god alone. Such a notorious guy had actually appeared in the Canopy Cloud Bazaar. Who could not be shocked and not be in an uproar? It should be known that this young demon god not only had an unparalleled ferocity, but he also had a great fortune related to the divine Tao. Just this alone was enough to make any life and death realm monarch fight over it. Search. Find him even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground. Whoever can provide clues about the young demon god will be rewarded with 10 million sea crystals. Everywhere in the world, people were searching for the young demon god. Not to mention normal experts, even life and death realm monarchs could not stay calm. They personally released their divine senses and searched with all their might. Before long, a young expert who had attended the party in the Drunken Wind Pavilion provided the news that he had seen the young demon god leaving with the saint of the Green Turtle clan. All of a sudden, all the attention was focused on the Green Turtle clan. As for those life and death realm experts, they had already rushed to the place where Lin Sun had left as soon as they got the news. The killing tribulation was coming. Outside the canopy Cloud Island, Ancestor Qing Lai put his hands behind his back, and a trace of seriousness appeared between his eyebrows. When the sky emitted killing intent, the stars would move. When the earth emitted killing intent, the dragons and snakes would rise. When the man emitted killing intent, the world would be turned upside down. Now, the area around the canopy Cloud Island was covered by the terrible killing intent. All the life and death realm monarchs set out to capture Lin Sun and seize his fortune. For a young man in the Tao Insight realm, such a horrible killing tribulation was undoubtedly too horrible. "Brother, I hope you didn't leave too late." Ancestor Qing Lai looked at the blue sea in the distance. Chapter 645. Swoosh. A bright silver boat that was shaped like a sharp shuttle and flowed with dense ancient diagrams tore open a straight path in the sky, and with a light flicker, it traversed a distance of 50 kilometers. Only when it vanished did a wave of sharp howls resound in space, and it spread through the sky and crushed the clouds into pieces. It was too fast. It was practically like teleportation, and it was difficult to catch its traces. This is the vast universe arc, an important artifact of the Thousand-Stream Tao sect from ancient times. It was refined by a saint that gathered void crystals from the outside world, and it is covered with 13,900 layers of array diagrams and restrictions. Once it is activated, it is said to be able to travel 1,000 miles in an instant and vanish without a trace for 10,000 miles. It isn't much different from true shifting technique. Ahu's clear and melodious voice that was like the sound of nature resounded in the boat. She wore a light yellow dress, her beautiful hair hung loosely on her shoulders, and her beautiful face was fair and gorgeous. She stood at the front of the cabin with a graceful and slender figure, and she emanated a pure and otherworldly aura. Unfortunately, after experiencing the corrosion of countless years, most of the diagrams of this treasure have become damaged, blurry, and have lost their might. Now, only less than 3,000 restrictions remain. Ahu sighed faintly and seemed to be rather regretful. Lin Sun and the old toad who stood at the side were slightly surprised. They hadn't expected that Ahu would actually know this treasure like the back of her hand, and she even knew its inheritance and origins. This seemed to be too unusual. Of course, even if this treasure is damaged, its superb speed is far from what other treasures can compare to. Ahu raised her eyes, and a wisp of a smile appeared on her plain and beautiful face. Most importantly, its defense is very formidable, and it's sufficient to disperse the attacks of numerous natural disasters when crossing the Soul Oblivion Sea. The old toad grunted coldly. No matter how formidable it is, can it withstand the attacks of a life and death king? He'd always had a problem with Ahu, and he felt that she was a source of calamity. Although she was breathtakingly beautiful, she was a complete seductress. Of course it can't. Ahu was indifferent, and she chuckled. However, relying on this treasure, it's sufficient for us to avoid the attacks of a life and death king. As soon as these words were spoken, even the old toad was speechless, and he was shocked. Being able to dodge the attack of a life and death realm king, this treasure could already be said to be heaven-defying. It was definitely a peerless weapon for escaping. It's already so powerful in its damaged state. I wonder what kind of unimaginable effects it will have when it's complete. Lin Sun's black eyes also flashed with surprise. He was a grand master of spirit runes. From the moment he entered the vast universe arc, he had been attracted by the ancient array diagrams that covered the surroundings. It wasn't difficult for him to see that most of these array diagrams were worn down and broken, having lost their former might. But even so, it still made Lin Sun marvel in secret. These ancient formations all contained traces of the Great Way, and they were mysterious and unfathomable. When this treasure was complete, it was a saint treasure refined by a saint. How could its power be ordinary? Ahu explained with a smile. Lin Sun suddenly realized that the spiritual tattoos contained in these ancient diagrams were not obscure. What was really powerful was the traces of Tao imprinted in the diagrams. That was the power left by the sages, and it was not something that Lin Sun could understand and comprehend at present. Miss Hu, are you also going to Xiao Empire? Lin Sun suddenly asked. Even though he had agreed to go with Hu, Lin Sun still hadn't seen through this woman's intentions until now. Hu smiled slightly, her clear eyes rippling and her pearly white teeth sparkling. Child, I will tell you when we are in a safe situation. Humph, you're so secretive. You must have some ulterior motives. Old Toad increasingly disliked Hu, feeling that this woman was too shrewd. Boom. Just then, a sudden change occurred. An invisible force blotted out the sky and fell from the vault of heaven, crushing the void and giving off a terrible roar. Beneath the shock waves of this terrifying strength, the entire vast universe arc violently trembled. It hummed as it rocked about. Lin Sun and Old Toad's hearts trembled at the same time, their expressions changing slightly. What a terrifying force! Child, the killing tribulation is coming. Ahu tucked her hair behind her ears, a rare serious and solemn expression on her pure and beautiful face. As she spoke, she steered the vast universe arc and began to dodge. Whoosh! Countless ancient formation diagrams shone like a tide, filling the surroundings of the vast universe arc in a dazzling and resplendent manner. In an instant, its speed suddenly increased by more than double. In the void, the treasure flickered indeterminately like a streak of flowing light, drifting swiftly like a bolt of lightning, and it quickly broke free from the cover of the terrifying force. At the same time, Lin Sun and Old Toad noticed that an incomparably mighty figure had appeared extremely far away. His aura shot through the heavens and the earth, shaking the mountains and rivers, and he was like a true overlord that had descended to the mortal world. It was a middle-aged man in a purple robe. His hair was pitch black like ink, and as his eyes blinked, it seemed as if the sun, moon, and stars were floating within them, possessing boundless might. Without a doubt, this was absolutely a life-and-death realm king. That attack just now was naturally the work of the middle-aged man in a purple robe. This king saw that fellow at the treasure auction. He's the ancestor of the Flamingo Bird clan. Fuck his grandmother. In this way they really have chased after us? Old Toad's expression changed greatly. Who wouldn't be terrified of the pursuit of a life-and-death realm king? At this moment, they didn't have the assistance of that mysterious old ape, and merely a treasured vessel. Would it be able to allow them to avoid such a calamity? Old Toad didn't have the slightest bit of confidence. Little bastard, you've killed numerous descendants of my South Sea's various clans. How could I allow you to flee just like this? Quickly leave your life behind for this king. Suddenly, another explosive shout that was like a thunderclap resounded out, and it shook the 9 heavens. A tall black-robed old man whose eyes surged with violet light and aura was boundlessly vast appeared, and he fiercely grabbed at the vast universe arc with his palm. Shit! Another fucking one has come. Old Toad cried out loudly, and his expression became extremely serious. Swish! Space was thrown into disorder. Unexpectedly, under Ahu's control, the vast universe arc was like a slippery loach that flashed past the black-robed old man's hand. The black-robed old man's face sank, and he seemed to have never imagined that the vast universe arc would actually be so inconceivable. He didn't have the time to think, and he continued his pursuit as he utterly didn't dare waste any time. He wasn't the only one that had set out this time, and there were over 10 life-and-death realm kings nearby that were rushing over with all their might. The black-robed old man was unable to tolerate the prey that was already in his hands being tainted by others. The pursuit had begun. In the cabin, Old Toad's expression changed violently as he cried out repeatedly, and he was utterly unable to maintain his composure. Up until now, he'd noticed at least 4 life and death realm kings had appeared. Moreover, this number was still continuously increasing. Motherfucker! Are these old freaks completely shameless? They're simply shameless to the extreme. This king has never seen such despicable old farts. Old Toad was very agitated and also very angry. They were simply bullying him. A group of old freaks that had lived for countless years had joined forces to deal with a junior. Weren't they afraid of being ridiculed by the people of the world? Little friend, my clan has no enmity with you. So long as you leave behind the fortuitous encounters in your possession, then this king will turn around and leave right away. How about it? A beautiful woman in plain clothes appeared with a graceful bearing, and her words were warm and amiable. But her actions were peerlessly ruthless. She directly withdrew a large net that was coiled with the glow of flames, and it spread out in the heavens and the earth before enveloping down towards the vast universe Arkansas. This was obviously a great weapon of slaughter, a true inescapable net. Once one fell into it, one would absolutely be immediately bound up. At this moment, even whose expression had become serious. A bit of sweat seeped out from her bright and clean forehead, and her slender figure was emanating a misty glow. She was obviously circulating her entire strength to control the vast universe arc, and she didn't dare be careless in the slightest. Lin Sun stood silently at the side, paying attention to the battlefield while observing Ahu's control technique. A treasure like the vast universe arc didn't just require a huge amount of high-grade spirit crystals to activate and operate, it even required a unique secret technique to control it. That's the 9th. Motherfucker! These damnable old bastards! When this king rises up one day, I'll definitely kill all of them. Old Toad was still roaring. If it was anyone else, they would probably be unable to not be nervous at this moment. That was an entire group of life and death realm kings. Existences like these seemed to already stand at the peak of the world, and they belonged to the overlords of the cultivation world. With a wave of their hands, they could annihilate mountains and rivers, flatten cities, and cause chaos and boundlessly terrifying. Yet now, such a group of terrifying old freaks had set out together. It was obvious how shocking the scene would be, and it was sufficient to shock the entire world. All along the way, the void was in disorder, the sky rumbled, and monstrous waves were set off on the vast ocean. Some living beings that were distributed along the way didn't even have the time to dodge before they were instantly annihilated, and their blood dyed the blue ocean red. They could be said to have died extremely aggrieved and wronged. On the other hand, the vast universe arc that Lin Sun and the others were on was like duckweed in the vast ocean. It was in an extremely dangerous situation, and it was suffering attacks from all directions at all times. Even Lin Sun's entire body was tense all along the way, and his state of mind was unprecedentedly heavy. When I step foot into the life and death realm, I'll surely make a trip here again to repay the kindness they gave me today. Lin Sun had never been ruthless easily, but now, he was truly thoroughly infuriated. Since entering the Demon Saint's secret realm until now, he'd been the focus of attention from all directions, and he was ceaselessly pursued. Even those old freaks were completely shameless and joined in. No matter how good Lin Sun's temper was, he couldn't help but have his surging killing intent aroused, and he gnashed his teeth with hatred. This was going too far. I don't know when you'll step foot into the life and death realm. I suggest that if you meet the clansmen of those old freaks in the future, you can kill them all. This kind of revenge is enough to make them feel pain in their bones. Suddenly, who on one side opened his mouth and gave a suggestion. What a ruthless woman. This was Old Toad's first reaction, but immediately, even he had to admit that this was really a very practical suggestion. I'll keep it in mind. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold and his expression was calm. Hold on for another quarter of an hour, and we'll be able to get out of trouble. Chapter 646. In the past, a quarter of an hour would have passed in the blink of an eye. But now, for Lin Sun and the others, it seemed especially long and torturous. A total of 13 life and death realm kings moved out together, using their killing moves to turn the sky and earth upside down in order to intercept and kill them. If one didn't stand in it, it would be impossible to imagine the feeling of terror and despair. Old Toad, who had been yelling furiously, was strangely silent. His expression was solemn and gloomy, and his eyes were filled with worry, as well as endless anger and hatred. This kind of situation was full of danger. It was like wandering on the line between life and death, and even the slightest carelessness would lead to eternal damnation. Lin Sun was also silent, and his black eyes were frighteningly deep like a bottomless abyss. After all, perhaps he was about to suppress all enemies in the Tao Insight realm, but in the face of life and death realm kings, he was still too weak. The feeling of only being able to escape and not being able to resist made Lin Sun yearn for more powerful strength for the first time. Yes, strength. Ah Hu's pretty face was a little pale. Although her expression was still calm, her slightly trembling body and the sweat on her forehead revealed that she was forcing herself to support herself and was about to reach her limit. A quarter of an hour. For her, it also seemed difficult and long, as if she was struggling in front of the gates of hell. No one could predict when death would come. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun wanted to ask several times why she would help them even though she knew such a killing tribulation would appear. But in the end, Lin Sun didn't ask. This was not the best time to talk at all, because it would affect Ah Hu and even the lives of all of them. But in the depths of his heart, no matter what made Ah Hu do this, Lin Sun had already remembered this great kindness. Boom! The shocking sound of the attack was surging all the time, causing the wind and clouds to change color, and all living things to tremble. Along the way, countless reefs and islands were destroyed. It was unknown how many innocent creatures had perished in this sudden calamity. But towards all this, those life and death realm kings turned a blind eye. In their eyes, there was only the vast universe arc. The great fortune that they yearned for was hidden there, and no matter who it was, they were unable to tolerate missing such a rare opportunity. However, contrary to all of their expectations, the vast universe arc was simply like a beam of light. Not only was its speed abnormally fast, but it also seemed like it was teleporting. Even when facing their attacks, it was actually able to escape every single time. This caused them to be shocked, and their expressions became gloomy. It was only a treasured vessel that was carrying a few little fellows that weren't worth mentioning. If they were to be allowed to escape, then they would simply lose all face. If news of this were to spread back to the southern CC, they would definitely become the laughingstock of the world. Chase. All the old monsters were furious and attacked with all their strength. In the end, Ah Hu wasn't able to persist for 15 minutes. On the way, she suddenly let out a muffled groan, and a strand of scarlet-red blood flowed out from the corners of her lips that had already turned pale. Moreover, a trace of exhaustion that was difficult to erase appeared between her brows. Just a moment more. Could it be that he had failed at the last moment? A wisp of a deep feeling of powerlessness surged in Ah Hu's heart. She'd already given it her all and squeezed out her strength to the limit. Tell me the control method. Let me do it. At this moment, Lin Sun's voice suddenly rang out in her ears. Startled, Ah Hu looked over and saw Lin Sun's calm and deep black eyes. For some strange reason, she subconsciously chose to trust him. Okay. Lin Sun stepped forward and took a deep breath. His expression became completely calm and focused, like the bottom of the sea, unmoving no matter how the currents washed over him. Old Toad was originally incomparably worried and really wanted to ask, "Can you do it?" But in the end, he restrained himself. Ah Hu clearly couldn't hold on any longer, and with the current situation being so vile and dangerous, he could only make every possible effort. However, what Old Toad and Ah Hu hadn't expected was that after Lin Sun grasped the control method, he would actually be able to display an incomparably exquisite level of skill. Under his control, the vast universe arc repeatedly turned misfortunes into blessings, narrowly avoiding danger after danger. That kind of skillful and easy control method wasn't any weaker than Ahu's own control. It was completely impossible to tell that this was Lin Sun's first time controlling the vast universe Arkansas. Later on, perhaps because he had become familiar with this kind of control, Lin Sun's technique became increasingly accurate, skillful, and nimble. Old Toad's eyes were fixed on Lin Sun, and he exclaimed that he was abnormal. And Ahu was also startled. Her clear eyes looked at the delicate face of the teenager beside her, and a rare extraordinary splendor emerged on her face. What they didn't know was that Lin Sun had been secretly observing and learning along the way, and had long since thoroughly memorized Ahu's control skills. In addition, Lin Sun was inscribing spiritual tattoos since he was a child, and he himself was a young spiritual tattoo grandmaster. Now that he was just controlling a treasure covered with many ancient diagrams, it naturally wasn't a problem for Lin Sun. Moreover, with his superb understanding of spiritual tattoo diagrams, he could even exert the greatest power when operating the treasure ship. This was probably something that even Ahu couldn't do. Huh? How could this be? Damn it! How can the power of this vast universe arc be so incredible? Isn't it said to be a damaged ancient sacred treasure? Damn it! If I find out who used this treasure to help that little bastard, I'll definitely crush his bones and scatter his ashes. In the outside world, the group of life and death kings keenly sensed the changes in the vast universe arc, and their faces instantly became much gloomier. From the beginning of the chase until now, a whole incense stick's worth of time had passed, and they, as a group of life and death kings, still couldn't do anything to an ancient treasure. This made them feel ashamed and angry. Not good, it seems to be Burial Sea Mound ahead. Suddenly, many life and death kings felt that something was wrong, and deep fear flashed through their eyes. As far as they knew, the sea area several thousand li away was the range of Burial Sea Mound. It was a place of great danger. In the ancient times, it used to be a battlefield of gods and demons, and no one knew how many great experts had fallen there. It had already become a strange and ominous place, like a forbidden land, full of unimaginable terror and danger. Even life and death kings didn't dare to recklessly wander in there. Quick, stop them. We must not let them enter. The black-robed old man of Fiery Bird Clan let out a long roar. Rumble! Instantly, the area fell into chaos. Over 10 old monsters attacked with all their strength, and they didn't hold back in the slightest. They wanted to stop the vast universe Arkansas. At this moment, it was undoubtedly the most dangerous and terrifying. Similarly, Lin Sun was unprecedentedly calm at this moment, and his mind was like ice as he circulated all his strength to control the vast universe Arkansas. The ceaseless attacks from the outside world were accurately captured by him, and then he controlled the vast universe arc to avoid them in an inconceivable manner. Sometimes, it seemed like he was clearly sealed and surrounded, but Lin Sun was always able to find a trace of opportunity in the impossible, find a trace of life in a hopeless situation, and escape danger after danger. All of this was witnessed by the old toad and Ahu, and it caused them to break out in cold sweat, and their hearts rose to their throats. That's Burial Sea Mound? Suddenly, the old toad cried out, and it saw a sea area covered in gray mist. The sky there was dark like eternal night, the seawater was pitch black, and the mist rose. It was mysterious and ghastly, and it caused one's heart to palpitate. The old toad had always been living there when it awakened its consciousness, so how could it not recognize it? As soon as he finished speaking, there was a swoosh, and the vast universe arc was like a silver stream of light as it swiftly charged into the boundless mist. At practically the same time, the attacks of the life and death realm kings covered the area, and the sea area almost collapsed into nothingness. Just a thread away, Lin Sun and the others were about to suffer a calamity. But it was precisely because of this thread of hope that they escaped and charged into the sea area where the burial sea mound was. Stop, there's no need to run anymore. Now, it's time for us to watch a good show. Suddenly, Ahu spoke, and a trace of hatred flashed in her clear eyes. Obviously, she was incomparably annoyed by the experience of being chased earlier. Watch a show? You're still in the mood to watch a show? This is the Motherf * King Burial Sea Mound, and it's even more terrifying than those life and death realm kings. The old toad was hopping mad. He'd always been in this area, so how could he not understand how terrifying and dangerous this place was? And he'd finally escaped with great difficulty and left this damned place. Who would have thought that he'd escape again? This caused his mood to be so terrible that it couldn't be any worse. Ahu giggled and didn't explain. She said, "Listen to me, you're absolutely right. Don't you want to see how unlucky those old geezers who were chasing us are?" Just a single sentence was enough to move the old toad. Lin Sun seemed to be lost in thought. He looked at Ahu, and in the end, he agreed and stopped the vast universe arc in the mist. A good show? What kind of good show was it? Their gazes swept out of the vast universe arc in unison and looked in the direction they came from. Damn it! They actually escaped in. Waves of furious roars resounded in the vicinity of the burial sea mound. The voices were filled with unwillingness and rage, and they were like rolling thunder that surged in all directions. Life and death realm kings arrived one after another, and their figures appeared nearby. But at this moment, all of them hesitated as if they were afraid and didn't dare to rashly charge in. What should we do? There's a great terror here. If we enter rashly, we'll probably suffer a calamity. An old monster spoke with a gloomy expression. What else can we do? Kill our way in. The great fortune possessed by that little bastard is related to the ancient divine Tao. How can we miss such a fortuitous encounter? Someone grunted coldly and seemed to be very unyielding, but he didn't take action immediately. Obviously, even though his words were resolute, his heart was filled with fear. This was the terror of the burial sea mound. It was like a forbidden area that was capable of causing the expressions of life and death realm kings to change. It was obvious how strange and ominous this area was. Since all of you aren't going, then I'll be going first. Suddenly, the black-robed old man from the Flamingo Bird clan stood out, and he took a large stride before his figure vanished within the boundless gray mist. This caused the other life and death realm kings to become restless, and their gazes flickered. In next to no time, another 5 or 6 old monsters gritted their teeth, made a decision, and charged in. The other life and death realm kings pondered for a moment. Even though they were unwilling in their hearts, they gave up in the end. They weren't cowards, and they deeply understood how terrifying the burial sea mound was. Once they rashly entered, then they might never have the chance to come out again. However, even if they chose to stop, the remaining old monsters didn't choose to leave. They were watching and unwilling to give up just like that. So long as a trace of opportunity appeared, they wouldn't hesitate to make a move. Chapter 647. The show is about to begin. In the cabin, Ahu's clear eyes flickered with an indescribable luster. She seemed excited. Gray mist filled the air, and the sea was deathly silent. Even though Lin Sun was in the vast universe arc, he still felt a strange atmosphere. It was as if something ominous would erupt here at any moment. Old Toad's expression was uncertain. Ever since he returned to the area covered by the burial path ocean tomb, he had become very abnormal. He became restless and spoke little. Soon, Lin Sun sensed the figures of 5 or 6 life and death kings. They were like divine rainbows that shot into the sky and flashed over. Their divine might was monstrous, and their bodies flowed with the aura of the great Tao. They shone brightly like gods. But after arriving here, no matter how strong they were unable to disperse the gray mist that covered the sky above the sea. This caused their expressions to become solemn. This was the burial path ocean tomb. According to legend, this was a battlefield in the ancient times, and a true Saint King had once fallen here. Saint King. This was an almighty existence that had stepped into the peak of the saint path and was known as the King of Saints. Their cultivation was almost as old as the heavens and as bright as the sun and moon. However, in the end, he still perished here. From this, one could imagine how terrifying and shocking the battle that had erupted on this battlefield was. Under such circumstances, even these life and death kings became vigilant and cautious. They didn't dare to recklessly charge in as if they were facing a great enemy. This is the show you were talking about? Lin Sun's heart sank and his eyes narrowed. They were too close. If they didn't leave now, those life and death kings would notice them in the blink of an eye. Don't worry. Just wait and watch the show. Ahu's eyes were suffused with a mysterious color. She was beautiful like a painting. When she saw those life and death kings arrive, not only was she not afraid, she seemed to be slightly disappointed. Why are there only a few? Are the other old monsters not here? She murmured softly. But this is enough. Lin Sun's heart shook and he couldn't help but glance at Ahu. She seemed to know what was going to happen. Right at this moment, those life and death kings noticed the vast universe Arkansas. Their eyes lit up and they all approached at the same time. There were a total of 6 of them. However, at this moment, they didn't immediately make a move. Instead, they were vigilant against each other, and there were faint signs of confrontation. The reason was very simple. On one hand, it was because this place was the Tao burial sea tomb, and it was too strange and ominous. So, it caused them to be cautious and not dare act rashly. On the other hand, it was because they were indeed in a stalemate and apprehensive of each other. They had already known that Lin Sun had a great fortune, but no matter which life and death realm king it was, they would not let this great fortune be taken away by others. They all knew that Lin Sun wasn't scary. What was really scary was that they were very likely to have conflicts and bloody battles with each other while competing for this great fortune. All of them were seniors that had lived for countless years, so they were naturally clearly aware of this. So, they had a tacit understanding and didn't attack rashly. Little fellow, why aren't you running away? Are you at your limit? The old ancestor of the Flamingo Bird clan, the black-robed old man, sneered. He had nothing to fear. His eyes were filled with a cold light, as if he could see through the vast universe arc and see Lin Sun within. Lin Sun didn't speak and he remained silent. Looks like you know that this is the Tao burial sea tomb, and it's a place of great danger that has existed since the ancient times. So you don't dare trespass rashly. Another ancestor spoke indifferently. Since you've already decided to allow yourself to be captured, then why don't you leave this place with us first? Perhaps, for the sake of your cooperation, we might give you a way out. As soon as these words were spoken, the other ancestors were instantly tempted. After all, this was the Tao burial sea tomb. In the past, the stronger the expert was, the more unwilling they were to enter this place. Because this was a place of great danger without a doubt. There were numerous strange and terrifying living beings here, and once an expert noticed that an expert had trespassed, the expert would suffer their frenzied attacks. It was even to the extent that in the past, there was no lack of life and death kings like these old fellows that had come here, and all of them perished here without exception. If it wasn't necessary, none of them were willing to fight and kill each other here for the sake of fighting for the fortune in Lin Sun's possession. Lin Sun was still silent. He was waiting for the so-called good show that Ahu mentioned. Old Toad's expression was extremely ugly, and he lowered his voice and said, "Demonis, what kind of trick are you playing? If you fail, we'll all be in trouble with you." Ahu pursed her cherry lips and smiled without saying a word, signaling Old Toad to calm down. "Little thing, hurry up and come out. Do you want to force us to capture and kill you on the spot?" An ancestor was impatient, and his voice was filled with killing intent. He saw Lin Sun as a piece of meat on a chopping board that could be slaughtered at will. Could there be a trap? Another ancestor reminded. He thought that Lin Sun and the others had arrived on the vast universe arc, but suddenly stopped there without moving. It seemed a bit abnormal. You worry too much. This is merely the border of the Dao burial sea tomb. Even if there's danger, we can leave at once. The black-robed ancestor of the flamingo bird clan disapproved. What's more, under our encirclement, does that kid have a chance to struggle? Hearing this, the other patriarchs felt relieved, and they smiled. Little guy, our patience is limited. I advise you to cooperate obediently and come out now. Otherwise, when we take action, what awaits you is bound to be a fate worse than death. An ancestor with a head full of green hair and a pair of azure wings on his back said coldly. Lin Sun could hold back his silence, but Old Toad couldn't. He stomped his feet and cursed, "You really have a lot of F***king nonsense. If you have the guts, then do it. If not, then hurry up and F***ck off." What did you say? Suddenly, the faces of the old monsters darkened, and their eyes flickered. At this time, the other party still dared to provoke them. This was undoubtedly a blasphemy against their dignity. Everyone, please do me a favor. I want to take this person's head and refine it into a wine cup. Don't fight with me. The voice of the green-haired ancestor was filled with dense killing intent. It's just a head. What's the harm in giving it to you? What we care more about is the good fortune of that kid. The ancestors spoke indifferently, and their voices were filled with cruelty and disdain. What a load of bullshit. Come, let me see which one of you dares to make the first move? Old Toad threw caution to the wind and taunted. You're courting death. Everyone, we're all here for the good fortune. Why don't I capture and kill him first, and then we can discuss who the good fortune belongs to. How about it? The black-robed old man's face darkened. He was thoroughly infuriated. As a life-and-death realm king, he was repeatedly provoked by a junior. This was simply a disgrace. All right. The other ancestors' eyes flickered, and they finally nodded in agreement. They were old and experienced, so they naturally wouldn't be disturbed by a few words from Old Toad. What they were truly apprehensive about was merely the matter of fighting over the good fortune. In other words, in their eyes, Lin Sun and the others were already no different from dead people. What was worthy of their attention was only the danger of the burial sea tomb and the conflict that might erupt when they fought over the good fortune. Boom! Without any hesitation, the black-robed old man made his move. A large hand that seemed to be condensed from divine flames fiercely grabbed at the vast universe Arkansas. It's coming. Old Toad's eyes narrowed. His heart was in his throat and his mouth was dry. Facing the attack of a life-and-death realm king, he couldn't help but be nervous. Lin Sun's black eyes surged and his whole body tensed up. Only Ahu's clear eyes shone brilliantly, and extraordinary splendor rippled like ripples. She whispered, "The show is about to begin." The large hand covered the sky, and like the gathering of divine flames, it was blazing and gorgeous, incinerating the void with terrifying might. This was the power that belonged to a life-and-death realm king, and it was truly shocking and frightening. When the other ancestors saw this, they nodded secretly. They knew that under the cover of such an attack, even if Lin Sun steered the vast universe arc, he wouldn't have the slightest possibility of escaping. They had already begun to think about how to divide up this good fortune after they captured that kid. However, at the same time, whether it was the black-robed old man or the other ancestors, all of them stiffened, and they felt their blood run cold. Puff! In the dusky mist, a faintly discernible beautiful figure had appeared, and she emanated a terrifying aura that caused all things in the world to tremble. Crack! The hand that was like a divine flame that blotted out the sky hadn't even covered the vast universe arc when it rumbled and exploded into pieces, and it was obliterated into nothingness like a piece of paper. That person is... An ancestor couldn't help but cry out loudly. He felt as if he'd fallen into an icy pit, and he felt cold from head to toe while his scalp went numb. The other ancestors were shocked and furious as well, and their expressions were pale and unsightly. At the first possible moment, they'd noticed extreme danger, and it caused them to feel as if they'd instantly been placed in a ghastly hell. The cause of all of this was that beautiful figure that had suddenly appeared in the dusky mist. She was obviously a woman. Her figure was faintly discernible, and her entire body was enveloped by boundless gray mist that surged with an obscure and shapeless force, causing others to be unable to see through her appearance. On the other hand, in the eyes of those old fellows, this mistress was like an overlord that stood towering in the heavens and the earth. She possessed an aura that was sufficient to destroy everything and look down upon the world, and it was too terrifying and strange. This caused their hearts to tremble. They were like ants facing a true god, and they were utterly unable to restrain the feelings of panic and terror that spread throughout their bodies. Who is she? Could it be that she's a strange overlord of the Tao burial tomb? It's her. At this instant, Lin Sun's entire body shook as well because he'd recognized that beautiful figure. Shockingly, it was that terrifying figure that had once appeared in the depths of the army of vengeful spirits. At that time, she'd appeared with the strange figure of a Buddha, and it had left behind an indelible deep impression on Lin Sun. However, Lin Sun had utterly never imagined that she would actually appear once more at a time like this. Could it be that Ahu's so-called reliance is this great figure? Chapter 648. Retreat quickly. An old ancestor roared. Needless to say, every old monster could feel the terror of the Mist Woman, which made their hearts tremble and their scalps go numb. However, it was too late. After the Mist Woman appeared, she didn't say a word, mysterious and terrifying. She waved her hand. An invisible force could be seen spreading, causing the sky and earth to turn upside down. The void was collapsing and sinking. Directly opposite, the black-robed old man bore the brunt of it. He didn't even have the time to struggle before he was drowned by the force. Then, a shocking scene appeared. The black-robed old man's figure emitted a muffled sound, and he turned into a flamingo divine bird. Then, his body shrunk countless times, turning into the size of an ant, and lightly fell into the Mist Woman's hand. It was also at this moment that the group of old monsters saw that the Mist Woman was holding a purple alms bowl with a broken corner. Chaotic chi appeared within it, making one's heart palpitate. The flamingo that the black-robed old man had turned into was suppressed in the purple alms bowl, and not a single sound could be heard. The surrounding old monsters sucked in a breath of cold air, their faces pale. It had only been a moment, but a life and death king among them had been suppressed. No, it was absorbed. Just like a subdued spirit bird, he was absorbed into the opponent's treasure and suppressed. There was no doubt that to any life and death realm king, being captured like this was simply more painful than being killed. After all, they had almost stood at the peak of the world's cultivators. Their divine might was vast, intimidating, and they were the center of attention. But now they were subdued and absorbed like spirit beasts. This was absolutely a great humiliation. But at the same time, the Mist Woman's profound and unfathomable means made those old monsters tremble with fear, and they were terrified to the extreme. Even life and death kings were like ants, unable to withstand a single blow. How terrifying was this mysterious Mist Woman? Who was she? At the same time, Lin Sun, Old Toad, and the others were also shocked. Their pupils shrank, and an indescribable shock arose in their hearts. The Mist Woman's unfathomable means made them think of that old ape. It was similarly terrifying and powerful, and viewed life and death kings as ants. It had an imposing manner that could dominate the world and shake the universe. Could she also be a saint? On the dusky sea of mist, the mysterious Mist Woman didn't hold back, and a formless power spread out from her body. Run! Those old freaks were completely terrified. Their eyes almost split apart from rage, and all of them seemed to have gone mad as they fled with all their might. But in an instant, they noticed that the surrounding space seemed to have been sealed, and it had transformed into a cage of the heavens and the earth that they were actually unable to break through. No! Their souls were almost scared out of their wits, and their expressions changed. It was too terrifying. Was this the danger of the burial sea tomb? Puff! An ancestor suffered a calamity. His figure turned into a green-horned crocodile before shrinking to the size of an ant. He was sucked into the purple alms bowl in the hands of the mistress. This scene was strange and frightening. A mysterious and unfathomable misty woman had appeared without saying a single word. However, she had easily subdued 2 life and death kings in just 2 moves. That kind of transcendent and terrifying posture was simply like the omnipotent gods of the legends who could sweep through the world. No! The other old freaks roared furiously and fled madly. They exerted their full strength and withdrew all sorts of trump cards, and they were like ants on a hot pan. If they had a choice, they would rather not step into this strange and ominous burial mound. Unfortunately, it was too late for regret. In the outside world, there were still 6 or 7 old freaks watching from the sidelines. They were unwilling to leave just like that, and they were pondering in their hearts. They wanted to find an opportunity to take a share of the spoils. To them, Lin Sun was like a living great fortune, and there were too many things hidden in his possession that caused them to covet and covet. For example, the Tao scriptures of the saints that flowed out from the sacred Isle of 5 Element. For example, the Golden Book on the Jade Archive in Violet Cloud Divine Mountain. No matter which one it was related to the secrets of the inheritance of saints, and it was sufficient to make any life and death king fight madly for it. Not to mention that besides that, Lin Sun possessed many treasures he'd obtained from killing the saints of the various clans, and they were similarly extremely tempting. Under such circumstances, who would be willing to give up and leave just like that? Everyone, why don't we join forces? No matter who obtains this fortune in the end, we'll immediately kill him when he returns from the burial sea tomb. In this way, the fortune will be ours. An ancestor made a suggestion, and it caused the other ancestors to be greatly tempted. However, right at this moment, a shrill cry sounded out from the depths of the gray and hazy burial sea tomb, and the shrill cry revealed boundless terror. All the old freaks present here shivered while their expressions changed. It's the ancestor of the Fiery Bird clan. Could it be that he suffered some sort of mishap? This caused their hearts to go cold, and they were surprised and bewildered. They felt fortunate in their hearts that they didn't choose to head to the burial sea tomb. That damnable place was too horrifying and mysterious. In the past, countless formidable figures had perished there. No! It wasn't long before another wave of frenzied and furious cries resounded. It was like the cry of a wild beast that had fallen into despair, and its voice was filled with terror. In an instant, all the old freaks in the outside world glanced at each other while chills ran down their spines. Something extremely terrifying had definitely occurred in the burial sea tomb. What should we do? Should we leave or stay? Right when they were surprised and bewildered in their hearts, the misty depths of the burial sea tomb had become deathly silent, and there wasn't a trace of movement emanating from it. But the more it was like this, the more horrifying it was. Then, what exactly happened in there? Have those old fellows that came with us suffered calamity and perished? I'll give this fortune to all of you. I still have important matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. Some ancestors couldn't stay any longer, and they felt an indescribable sense of pressure and terror, so they turned around and left. The expressions of the other old freaks changed indeterminately when they saw this, and they seemed to be very hesitant. But in merely a short moment, they noticed that a beautiful figure seemed to have faintly appeared in the depths of the mist. What's that? Their entire bodies stiffened while their scalps went numb. Merely a single glance caused them to feel unprecedented danger surge through their entire bodies. Let's go. They didn't dare hesitate in the slightest, and they instantly dispersed and fled faster than anyone else. It was also at this moment that these old freaks that were waiting and watching from the outside world finally realized that their companions that had entered the burial sea tomb would probably be unable to come out. When they thought of that faintly discernible beautiful figure, their entire bodies shivered as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. It was too terrifying. Is that the great calamity that's hidden within the burial sea tomb? The vast universe arc was deathly silent. Lin Sun and the old toad were shocked, and they were unable to calm down for a long time. Before their eyes, Life and Death King after Life and Death King were subdued like ants by the mysterious mistress and suppressed into the violet alms bowl. From the beginning until the end, she didn't encounter the slightest resistance, and she seemed to be extremely relaxed. But it was precisely because of this that Lin Sun and the others were shocked, and their mouths went dry. She's too formidable. She's suppressing Life and Death Kings like slaughtering chickens. Exactly how terrifying is her cultivation to be able to accomplish this? It's unimaginable. In the end, the 6 old freaks that entered the burial sea tomb were completely annihilated, and not a single one of them was able to escape. Is this the show that Ahu spoke of? Could it be that she knew all of this would occur, and that's why she controlled the vast universe arc and charged into the area of the burial sea tomb at full force? In an instant, the gazes Lin Sun and the others shot at who had changed. This mysterious young woman wasn't just beautiful like an otherworldly celestial maiden, she obviously had a great background that was impossible to figure out. Even the old toad went silent. Since he'd awakened his consciousness, he'd lived in the burial sea tomb, and he'd seen the kings of the army of vengeful spirits, and all sorts of strange and inauspicious things. But he'd utterly never known that such a peerlessly terrifying existence like the mistress existed in this mysterious area. But it just so happened that who seemed to understand the burial sea tomb even better than him, and this seemed to be too inconceivable. The show's over. Are all of you satisfied? Ahu chuckled, and her peerlessly white face was filled with a relaxed expression. Who exactly are you? The old toad couldn't help but ask with a serious expression. Lin Sun looked over as well. At this moment, the danger had been eliminated, and even the mysterious mistress had vanished. It was time for him to have a chat with this young woman with a charming smile and beautiful eyes. Who I am isn't important. What's important is that I was only seized by a sudden impulse this time, and I wanted to form good karma with all of you. Ahu's eyes were clear and bright while a smile hung on the corners of her mouth. She possessed the charm of a young woman, and also a pure and ethereal bearing. It seemed to be very contradictory, yet it perfectly fused with her. Good karma. Yes, good karma. Ahu nodded seriously. This kind of saying was very vague, but she seemed to take it very seriously, and there was a rare trace of solemnity between her brows. Ha ha, you helped us just for good karma? The old toad felt that it was very absurd, and he couldn't help but laugh out loud. This isn't funny, Ahu said indifferently. Seeing how serious she was, Lin Sun was a little convinced, and he said thoughtfully, this good karma is a little too big. I'm afraid I won't be able to repay it in the future. Ahu smiled slightly, her cherry lips bright red, and her pearly white teeth. She said, if you can't repay it, then forget it. The so-called good karma has already been sown, and that's enough. If the flower blooms, then of course you'll be happy, and if not, there's no need to regret it. As soon as she finished speaking, Ahu waved her little crystalline fist and said with a grin, all right, I should be leaving as well. I wish both young masters a pleasant journey, and I look forward to the day I'm able to reunite with both of you. Her figure fluttered away like a dreamy shadow, and no one could stop her. Hey, you don't want this treasure ship anymore? Lin Sun hurriedly called out. This was originally prepared for you. Please accept it, and there's no need to be polite. In the distant void, Ahu's clear and melodious voice, like the sounds of nature, rang out. Soon, she disappeared. This which must have a big plot to make us owe such a big favor. The old toad gnashed his teeth. Lin Sun was lost in thought, and after a while, he said softly, "It seems that our first encounter with her wasn't a coincidence. Maybe, from that time on, she has been preparing this good karma for us. No matter who she is, she has done us a big favor, and no matter what her intentions are, there will be a day when the mystery will be solved." P.S. About Ah Hu's origin, I was inspired by a short story recorded in the Tang Dynasty's legendary novel Guang e.g. The main character of the story is called Ah Hu, a maverick girl in a yellow dress. She is intelligent and quick-witted, and her cultivation is different from that of the world. If you are interested, you can search for it. In addition, thank you, Brother Wachuk, for your gift. For the time being, let's wait for 2 chapters tonight. Tomorrow we'll start a new plot, which is also called Crown Covers the Capital. Chapter 649. Of the 13 life and death kings chasing after the young demon god, 6 had encountered a calamity in Burial Sea Tomb, their fate unknown. The other 7 had coincidentally caught a glimpse of a mysterious dominator-like figure and fled in panic. When this news spread out, it was like a storm that swept through the entire South Ocean region at an inconceivable speed. All the clans and forces in various regions were overwhelmed with shock and fell into an uproar. In a single day, 6 ancestor-level powerhouses had disappeared. They might have encountered a calamity and never returned. Such a frightening thing had almost never happened in the past. It was too frightening. This also made the clans of South Ocean Sea increasingly fearful of the name Burial Sea Tomb. They viewed it as a forbidden area of great danger. At the same time, the news of the young demon god spread along with this uproar, causing countless uproars. No one could imagine that such a mere heavenly passage realm human youngster seemed unkillable. Every time he encountered a monstrous calamity, he would escape. It was simply like a miracle. Back then, outside the demon saint's secret realm, the powerhouses of various clans were eyeing him covetously and besieging him. But in the end, he still escaped. And now, facing the pursuit of more than 10 life and death kings, he once again escaped alive. On the contrary, those life and death kings had either died or fled. It was truly flabbergasting. All of this was too unimaginable, and it made all the clans of South Ocean Sea feel humiliated and resentful. A human youngster had wreaked havoc in South Ocean Sea, stirring up countless waves. But in the end, no one could stop him and let him leave safely. All of this showed that the clans of South Ocean Sea were too incompetent. Lin Xian. No matter how shocking this storm was, no matter how much uproar and shock it caused, this name was thoroughly engraved in the minds of all the clans and forces. This was because this name represented a human youngster hailed as the demon god, who had once left behind a legend in South Ocean Sea. However, to all the clans, this legend of the young demon god was an unbearable humiliation. This is the demeanor of a true expert. When he heard this news, Green Turtle Clan's territory on Jade Light Island, Qin Yunyang once again sighed with emotion. It was also on this day that he entered the clan's ancestral ground and entered secluded cultivation. People of the time do not recognize the cloud-soaring tree. Only when the cloud-soaring tree is high will the Tao begin. With his hands behind his back, Green Turtle Ancestor proudly said to the high-level figures of the Green Turtle Clan around him, "Just wait and see. My brother is destined to shine in the coming battle of the world." While the South Sea was in an uproar, Lin Sun had already steered the vast universe arc back to Xiao Empire with the old toad. Who is that mysterious misty woman? What's her relationship with Ah Hu? Is that Buddha with empty eye sockets and a strange color still somewhere in the Burial Tao Sea grave? The Tao Burial Sea Tomb, the endless ruins, the demonic saint's secret realm. There are indeed many mysterious and terrifying colors in the depths of the soul oblivion ocean. One day, I'll come back and repay the kindness you've given me. Whoosh! Under Lin Sun's control, The vast universe arc was like a ray of flowing light, steaming with dense and ancient formations. It was shining like silver rain, flashing forward in the void at an extremely fast speed. Although the speed of this broken ancient treasure was incredibly fast, it also consumed a lot of physical strength. According to Lin Sun's current cultivation, he could only hold on for 6 hours at most. In addition, this ancient treasure also needed a large number of high-level spiritual crystals to activate the power of the formation, which was also a huge expense. If Lin Sun hadn't gained a lot in the demonic saint's secret realm, he would have been overwhelmed by this consumption. This was the drawback of a powerful ancient treasure. Although it was magical, its consumption was also amazing. Ordinary people couldn't use it at all. These were all trivial matters. As long as he could return to Xiao Empire safely, all the consumption was worth it. What really alerted Lin Sun was that there were too many dangers and natural disasters along the way, such as void storms, time turbulence, terrible thunder and lightning, and ferocious creatures distributed in the sea. Danger could be said to be everywhere, and he couldn't be careless at all. The ancient corpses that had floated on the surface of the sea for countless years might contain dangers that were sufficient to annihilate everything. In the strange and misty mist, a formidable creature that was sufficient to make even a life-and-death king tremble in fear might appear at any time. Besides this, there were numerous strange races, groups of vengeful spirits, cruel and bloodthirsty strange corpses, and there was no lack of rare and strange creatures that wandered in various areas of the Soul Oblivion Sea. This place was simply like hell, and it was so terrifying that it was sufficient to make any cultivator feel despair and not dare take another step forward. Even if Lin Sun and the others were driving the vast universe arc, they had to be careful all along the way as they were deeply afraid of provoking danger. Fortunately, the vast universe arc's dodging ability was extremely swift and fierce, and it could even avoid the attacks of a life-and-death king. This allowed Lin Sun and the others to resolve danger after danger without mishap. Lin Sun and the old toad took turns controlling the vast universe arc, and they cooperated tacitly without any mishaps. All along the way, Lin Sun didn't stop cultivating. So long as he had free time, he would concentrate on cultivating and comprehending the profundities of the martial Tao. On the 5th day of sailing on the Soul Oblivion Sea, Lin Sun had comprehended the third form of the Calamity Dragon 9 transformations, the Swanee Seal. Once it was executed, a brilliant ancient seal could be condensed in his hands, and it was coiled with the aura of the Tao. It could release the image of a divine beast Swanee that could crush mountains and throw the world into chaos. Lin Sun tested it on a group of vengeful spirits on the way. With a single seal, space exploded apart, and 6 vengeful spirit commanders with strengths comparable to the heavenly insight realm and 54 vengeful spirit soldiers with cultivations equivalent to the Sea of Soul realm were completely obliterated. On the 9th day of sailing on the Soul Oblivion Sea, Lin Sun and the others suffered a sneak attack and were surrounded by a group of strange, snake-shaped creatures. This was the first time they'd been surrounded since they'd driven the vast universe Arkansas. The reason was that there were too many snake-shaped creatures, and they blotted out the heavens and the earth like a tide. Moreover, they were swift like ghosts and were impossible to guard against. During this time of being surrounded, Lin Sun comprehended the 4th form of the Calamity Dragon 9 transformations, the Lower Tyrant Restriction. Lower Tyrant was a kind of ancient divine beast with the strength to support the heavens and shake the world. Once the Lower Tyrant Restriction was executed, it was like a lower tyrant appeared in the world from ancient times. Under the cover of the terrible power, it could seal and suppress all living creatures. To put it simply, this move was an extremely marvelous and overbearing sealing technique. With this move, the tide-like snake-shaped creatures were almost imprisoned in an instant. They could no longer move and lost their greatest advantage in speed. In the end, Lin Sun and the others easily broke free and flew away. On the 16th day, Lin Sun and the others encountered a sudden outbreak of a space-time storm. They had to retreat temporarily and stop at a distance, not daring to move forward rashly. After waiting for a full 7 days, the space-time storm disappeared. During these 7 days, Lin Sun made another breakthrough in martial arts and comprehended the 5th move of the Calamity Dragon 9 transformations, the Swanee Chi. On the 33rd day, Old Toad suddenly gained enlightenment during cultivation and decided to enter the first floor of the Wordless Pagoda for closed-door training. It also told Lin Sun that this closed-door training would last at least a year and at most 3 years. Therefore, in the following days, Lin Sun could only operate the vast universe arc alone and shuttle through the vast soul oblivion sea. He walked and stopped from time to time. Along the way, he experienced many dangers and saw many incredible wonders and strange scenes. This kind of experience sharpened his state of mind again and again. His understanding of the Great Tao, the world, and all things became more profound. This was cultivation. Building a cart behind closed doors was a kind of cultivation path. Traveling the world was also a kind of cultivation path. Knowledge, experience, comprehension, everything would obtain a completely new improvement and transformation during this process. And this kind of transformation seemed to have no substantial improvement in cultivation, but it was enough to let the cultivator go further and broader on the Great Tao Road. Even when advancing, there was no need to worry about the risk of unstable state of mind, insufficient experience, or qi deviation. On the 54th day, Lin Sun, who was operating the vast universe arc, suddenly had a flash of light in his eyes. He was keenly aware that the aura between heaven and earth had changed. It was no longer as violent and fierce as before, nor was the strange and oppressive atmosphere. It was as if he had come from a barren land to a beautiful world. It should not be far from Xiao Empire. Lin Sun breathed a long sigh of relief, as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. After nearly 2 months, he returned from the depths of the strange and dangerous soul oblivion sea. Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This time, it could be said that he had a narrow escape from death. Lin Sun let the vast universe arc drift on the sea at will and no longer paid attention to it, letting it go with the waves. He lay there lazily, his head pillowed on his arms, his dark eyes gazing at the sky. Here, the sky was dyed as if it had been washed, vast and distant. The sea was blue and clear, stretching as far as the eye could see. The brilliant sunlight shone down, making the sea water shimmer with a bright and beautiful luster. Occasionally, flocks of seabirds passed by, sprinkling their clear cries. The scenery was picturesque and full of life. Relying on Lin Sun's peerlessly powerful perception, he had long since noticed that there was no danger that could threaten him in the sea here. He was completely relaxed, and the aura all over his body was like a dormant dragon. Only based on appearance, no one was worthy. This handsome and elegant young man would be the young devil god that caused headaches and anger to the various clans of the Southern Sea. At this moment, he was like a traveler drifting on the sea, leisurely and contented. He hadn't been so relaxed for a long time. This feeling was indescribably tranquil and comfortable, and it made his state of mind become extraordinarily tranquil and ethereal. From entering the soul oblivion sea to returning, there had been too many twists and turns and dangers on the way, causing Lin Sun to be exhausted and constantly in a tense state. Only now did he have the chance to enjoy this rare moment of peace. However, what made Lin Sun speechless was that the silence was soon broken by a sudden sound of something breaking through the air. Chapter 650. Damn it! Is the Han family really going to turn against us? They actually sent a grand cultivator at the Tao Insight realm to hunt us down. A young man in a luxurious robe gnashed his teeth, his face full of anger. His name was Yi Donka. He was slim and straight like a spear. His skin was bronze in color, as if it was made of bronze, and he looked cold and fierce. Yidonka, another woman, and a group of squires were being hunted down, which made them all frightened and angry. The one who was chasing them was a famous cultivator from the Han family, one of the three major forces in the East Sea of the Empire. And the Han family was the sworn enemy of the force they were in. In the past, even if they were enemies, they would not rashly clash with each other, in case both sides suffered losses. But this time, in order to compete for a spiritual mine in the East Sea, the Han family had mobilized a large number of people, and they were full of murderous intent. This was out of Yidonka's expectation. Even a grand cultivator at the Tao Insight realm has been dispatched. They must be trying to kill us to prevent us from sending the news back to the clan and destroying their plan to occupy the spiritual mine. The woman beside him had a graceful figure and an outstanding appearance. She wore a purple dress and was rather charming and alluring. Her name was Yi Lingtong. Like Yidonka, she was also a member of the Yi family in the East Sea. But at this moment, Yi Lingtong's pretty face was as cold as frost. She was also extremely angry. She clenched her teeth, and her eyes were full of anger. "If we can get out of here, I will make them pay 10 times for what they did today." Yidonka's face was as gloomy as water. "Do we still have a chance?" Yi Lingtong's lips curled into a bitter smile. Behind them, a grand cultivator at the Tao Insight realm was coming with all his strength. It wouldn't take long for him to intercept them. Under such circumstances, how could they have a chance to get out of here? This time, the Han family was really ruthless. They actually sent a grand cultivator at the Tao Insight realm to kill them. Obviously, they had no intention of letting them leave alive. Yidonka also fell silent. A touch of sorrow and unwillingness flashed through his eyes. Were they going to give up just like this? Behind them, the squires were already scared out of their wit. Their faces were pale and they were panicking. Like stray dogs? How ironic! Yidonka laughed at himself. But no matter what, they would never give up until the last moment. Swish, swish, swish. Above the dark blue ocean, they fled with all their might. Their figures were like rainbows that were dazzling and resplendent. At this moment, they only cared about fleeing for their lives, and they didn't have the time to conceal their tracks at all. Suddenly, Yi Lingtong was stunned. She noticed that there was actually a treasured vessel floating on the surface of the sea ahead, and a young man in moon-white clothes was lying lazily on the deck while basking in the sun with satisfaction. That carefree and leisurely appearance caused Yi Lingtong to recall the scene, and she felt even more bitter in her heart. She recalled her current sorry state and despair, and compared to the carefree appearance of that youth, it was simply like the difference between heaven and hell. Not good. Let's go. At this moment, Yidonka, who was leading the way, narrowed his eyes. He sensed a strong aura sweeping over like a storm. This caused all of their bodies to stiffen, and they felt as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. Their expressions changed greatly. So fast. Was this the horror of the Tao Insight realm? Haha, you are but a bunch of ants. From the moment I, Han Yunchong, set my sights on you, your lives are no longer in your control. A burst of disdainful sneer resounded, and it was like a raging thunder that shook the heaven and earth. Along with the voice, a flying light that looked like a shocking rainbow swept over from the void in the distance with a swoosh. It's over. Yidonka and Yi Lingtong's faces turned pale, and a trace of uncontrollable despair emerged in their hearts. Han Yunchong was a famous cultivator in the Tao Insight realm in the East Sea. His cultivation could be said to be exquisite and strong. He'd traveled unhindered in the East Sea for decades, and no one knew how many powerful enemies he'd killed. He was absolutely a powerful existence in the older generation. If the high-level experts of the Yi clan were here, they wouldn't be afraid of Han Yunchong's violence. But now, all the cultivators here were in the sea spirit realm, and they were like vulnerable ants in front of a great cultivator like Han Yunchong. Under such circumstances, how could they not feel despair? Han Yunchong, as an elder, are you really going to kill us all? If the Yi clan finds out, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences. Yidonka said in a cold voice. Humph, you're about to die and you still want to threaten me? Han Yunchong snorted coldly and his eyes were cold. Don't worry, as long as I kill all of you today, who in the world will know that I did it? Speaking of this, he was suddenly stunned, and his eyes caught a glimpse of Lin Sun not far away. But when he saw that Lin Sun was just a teenager with an ordinary aura, he didn't take it seriously. Seeing this scene, Yi Lingtong's face changed, and she said quickly, "Friend, please leave. Once this old bastard takes action, he will definitely kill you. If you stay here, you will be affected." The teenager was naturally Lin Sun. He was enjoying a rare peace. Who would have thought that such a thing would happen? His mood was immediately ruined. But he also saw that this pursuit was not aimed at him, and it was purely an accident. So he had been watching coldly and didn't want to be involved in it. But when he heard Yi Lingtong's reminder, Lin Sun had a good impression of her. It was really rare that she could kindly remind him when they met by chance. Han Yunchong couldn't help laughing. "Little girl, don't you think it's ridiculous? With me here, do you think that boy can leave?" His voice was filled with disdain. What a group of ignorant juniors. They didn't know how terrible the power of Tao Insight Realm was. It was really naive of them to persuade the boy to leave under his eyes. "Han Yunchong, you just want to deal with us. This matter has nothing to do with this friend. Why do you have to be so cruel?" Yi Lingtong was furious. "To think that you're a great cultivator of the Eastern Sea, yet your methods are so ruthless and despicable. Cut the crap. In order to prevent the news from leaking, even if this boy is innocent, he can't escape death today. He can only blame his bad luck." Han Yunchong was expressionless, and his voice was cold. Yi Lingtong was so angry that she almost broke her teeth, and her pretty face turned red. But in the end, she held back her anger and felt sad. It was futile to argue, and it couldn't change Han Yunchong's determination to kill everyone. But it was a pity that the boy should encounter such a disaster today. How innocent he was. "Friend, I'm really sorry. It's us who hurt you," Yi Lingtong said to Lin Sun in a low voice with an apologetic face. "Little girl, you talk too much nonsense. Let's start with you." Han Yunchong was a little impatient. He waved his sleeve, and a bright golden rainbow spread out in the void. Boom! The void collapsed. The golden rainbow was blazing and full of terrible power. Just its momentum made Yidonka and others completely desperate. It was too horrible. This was the power of Tao Insight Realm. Who could resist it? Yi Lingtong, who bore the brunt of it, turned pale and her heart was drowned by great fear. She had never felt so close to death before. Was she really going to die? Yi Lingtong's mind went blank, and she even forgot to struggle. "Who do you think you are? How dare you kill people in front of me?" Suddenly, an indifferent voice sounded in her ears. Yi Lingtong was stunned, but suddenly found that she was not dead. She didn't know when a handsome figure had stood in front of her. It was that boy. This made Yi Lingtong's heart tremble. She almost subconsciously shouted, "Friend, get away! Do you want to die?" But as soon as she said that, she noticed that the atmosphere was a little strange. Whether it was Yidonka or Han Yunchong, they all had a surprised look on their faces, and their eyes were fixed on the boy. Suddenly, Yi Lingtong remembered that the golden rainbow that Han Yunchong had displayed just now couldn't be resolved by the boy in front of her, could it? "I didn't expect that you, little guy, to be able to block my blow. You can be regarded as a powerful figure among the younger generation," Han Yunchong said, frowning. In his eyes, Lin Sun's breath was ordinary and there was nothing special about him. But it was such a boy who had blocked his blow, which was very unusual. Sure enough, he helped me solve the problem. Yi Lingtong was finally convinced, but she still couldn't believe it. Han Yunchong was a great cultivator at the Heavenly Insight Realm. His attack seemed casual, but it wasn't something that just anyone could block. Not only Yi Lingtong, but Yi Dongke and the others also couldn't believe it. Everything happened so fast that they almost felt dizzy. The reason was simple. The gap between their realms was so great that their reaction was far from that of Tao Insight Realm. But it's all over. No matter who you are nothing in front of me. Han Yuncheng was indifferent, and his power became more and more terrible. In Xiao Empire, a practitioner in Tao Insight Realm could dominate a region and shake a province. Naturally, he didn't take some young people seriously. Boom! He took a step forward, and the void exploded as if collapsing. A terrible power of divine light spread out from his body. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged, and the sea was completely boiling. Go to hell! Han Yuncheng slapped down with a roar of Taoist sense. His beard and hair flew in the air, and his eyes were like cold lightning. His divine power was so terrible that it made everyone's expression change. Even Yi Lingtong and Yi Dongke felt a suffocating oppressive force, as if they had fallen into a violent purgatory. Child hide! Yi Lingtong reminded Lin anxiously. But Lin Sun didn't seem to feel it. He just raised his head and glanced at Han Yuncheng, with an indescribable mockery flashing in his black eyes. At the same time, the aura that had been dormant like a dragon in Lin Sun's body was released like lava at this moment. It was like an ancient peerless beast had awakened in Lin Sun's body at this moment. As soon as the horrible aura was released, it filled the world in an instant, causing the void to collapse inch by inch and the world to wail. Before Han Yuncheng's palm fell on Lin Sun, it was crushed by this aura and instantly turned into a rain of light. Crack! At the same time, the sound of bones breaking rang out. Han Yuncheng's right hand seemed to be struck by lightning. It was badly mutilated and his tendons and bones were broken. Chapter 651. Ah! Han Yuncheng screamed. His right hand was badly mutilated and almost destroyed, which made him feel great pain. His face was full of shock and anger, and he almost couldn't believe his own research. How could Lin Sun break his attack and hurt him just by releasing his qi? Han Yuncheng had seen many things since he started his cultivation. He was definitely a ruthless person, but he had never seen such a horrible and incredible thing. In the blink of an eye, an ordinary young man seemed to have transformed into a god of war. With just his aura, he made him, who was at the heavenly insight realm, suffer a big loss. This, even if he told others, no one would believe him, right? The whole area was silent. Only the roar of Lin Sun's qi was surging. At this moment, he was like a dormant dragon that had just woken up. His black eyes were like abysses, emitting a cold and deep luster. His figure was full of Taoist aura, which made him look like an immortal with an extraordinary temperament. How could he be so powerful? Yi Lingtong was supposed to be ecstatic, but now she was overwhelmed by shock like a tide. Too powerful. It felt as if an ordinary young man had instantly transformed into a war god that stood towering above the 9 heavens, and his imposing aura swallowed the world while his might shot into the sky. That kind of power was beyond Yi Lingtong's understanding. She couldn't imagine how such a young man could defeat Han Yuncheng's attack with his qi alone. Han Yuncheng was a Tao Insight Realm expert. He was a ruthless senior who had dominated East Sea for decades and was famous for his prowess. However, such an inconceivable thing had happened. If Yi Lingtong hadn't been sure that she had not lost her mind, she would have thought she was dreaming. It turns out that this young man is a hidden top master. On the other side, Yi Dongke was also shocked. This might be called a sage hiding his true colors? As for the attendants, they'd been shocked to the point of being stunned on the spot, and their mouths were agape while they were flabbergasted. This was Lin Sun's power at the moment. With his current fighting capacity, he could be called a king in the Tao Insight realm. He could overlook everything and suppress all enemies in this realm. As for Han Yuncheng, he might be a famous top figure in the Xiao Empire, but in Lin Sun's view, this guy was even inferior to Qin Yunyang, who could only be regarded as an ordinary saint. Who are you? How dare you interfere with the Han family's matters? Han Yunchong's face was livid and solemn. He didn't dare attack rashly again. At this moment, the youth in front of him seemed to have become his number one enemy. Lin Sun frowned. What Han family? All I know is that you're not going to silence me today? Since that's the case, what's the point of talking so much? He was indeed a little annoyed. It wasn't easy for him to obtain a moment of peace, but it was destroyed by someone. What Lin Sun couldn't tolerate most was that he was just an outsider, but Han Yunchong still wanted to attack him, which was too overbearing and excessive. He was even able to imagine that if it was another person that was unintentionally swept into this pursuit, then that person would have probably been killed indiscriminately by Han Yunchong a long time ago. Maybe this is a misunderstanding. As long as you identify yourself and prove that you have nothing to do with this, I will promise in the name of the Han clan of the East Ocean that we will not make things difficult for you. Han Yunchong took a deep breath and said in a low voice, My friend, you should know that no one in the East Ocean dares to fight against the Han family so far. These words were a combination of carrot and stick, a warning and a threat. As long as one was not a fool, he could understand the meaning behind it. Child, this old bastard is obviously talking nonsense. In the East Ocean, the Yi family is not afraid of the Han family. Suddenly, Yi Dongke opened his mouth and cupped his hands to Lin Sun. In my opinion, since this old bastard dared to disrespect you just now and now threatened you with words, his attitude is really despicable. So, I hope you don't show any mercy and kill this old bastard now. Child, please rest assured that after killing him, the Yi family will definitely take full responsibility for this matter, and under the protection of the Yi family, we will never let you suffer the revenge of the Han family. Obviously, Yi Dongke wanted to ask Lin Sun to kill Han Yunchong, and promised in the name of the Yi family of the East Ocean that they would not bring trouble to Lin Sun. Han Yunchong's face changed slightly and became extremely gloomy. He said, My friend, the Yi family can protect you for a while, but it can't protect you for a lifetime. Please think twice. It's not difficult. With your strength, you can join the Yi family and serve as a guest elder. At that time, we will be a family. Let's see if the Han family dares to retaliate. Yi Dongke calmed down and even took this opportunity to offer an olive branch to recruit Lin Sun to join the Yi family of the East Ocean. This was not because he was arrogant, but in his opinion, with the current foundation and power of the Yi family in the East Ocean, if they offered a place as a guest elder, it would definitely attract countless strong practitioners in the Tao Insight realm to join them. And if he could recruit such a young top practitioner like Lin Sun into the Yi family with the identity of a guest elder, it was absolutely worth it. Yi Dongke believed that with Lin Sun's wisdom, as long as he knew something about the Yi family of the East Ocean, he would definitely understand his sincerity. What benefits do you think I got from the Yi family of the East Ocean just now? Lin Sun said with a faint smile, his black eyes cold. Yi Dongke's face changed slightly and he said, Absolutely not. I just want to seek wealth for you. After all, cultivation also needs resources. If you join the Yi family, I believe that with your strength, you will definitely get the full support of the Yi family. Lin Sun's expression became a little cold. This scene was seen by Yi Lingtong next to him, which made her heart throb inexplicably. She hurriedly said, Cousin, don't say any more. Yi Dongke was stunned. He was also keenly aware that Lin Sun's attitude was a little cold, which made him immediately silent and apologetic, not daring to say more. Now that they still needed Lin Sun's strength to get out of trouble, they naturally dared not to offend Lin Sun. Since you don't want to have anything to do with the Yi family, you must have thought it over and don't want to get involved in this storm. At this time, Han Yunchong suddenly smiled as if he had found confidence. Now, as long as you, my friend, immediately, I also promise that the Han family will not embarrass you in the East Ocean. Hearing this, Yi Dongke and others all changed their expressions. Just now, Lin Sun's attitude was a little cold. It seemed that he rejected Yi Dongke's suggestion. Now, would he really choose to stay out of this storm as Han Yunchong said? Yi Lingtong was even more anxious. She looked at Lin Sun with a pleading look and complained about Yi Dongke's recklessness in her heart. Wasn't it obvious that Yi Dongke wanted to recruit that young man with the identity of a guest elder at this time? What was more, how could such a young man like a dragon in the sky be recruited by the Yi family with the identity of a guest elder? How stupid he was! Lin Sun ignored Yi Lingtong's gaze. Looking at the confident Han Yunchong, he suddenly felt a little ridiculous. The Han family of the East Ocean? Lin Sun had offended so many superior forces in the Forbidden City. Why should he be afraid of a force in the East Ocean? What was more, even in the Soul Oblivion Sea, he had killed so many saints of various tribes. When did Lin Sun ever fear the force behind these saints? Most importantly, the current Lin Sun was really different from the past. He had seen the real saints, as well as the corpses of many saints who had fallen in the demon saint's secret realm. He had even been chased by many life and death realm kings, but he was still living freely to this day. With this experience, Lin Sun felt Yi Dongke's proposal and Han Yunchong's threat were very absurd. Being stared at by Lin Sun's cold and deep eyes, Han Yunchong suddenly felt a little scared and inexplicably anxious. He couldn't help saying, "What's the matter? Are you really going to act willfully and look down on the Han family? You should know that in the East Ocean, even the great practitioners of reincarnation developing realm dare not disrespect the Han family." Really? Lin Sun's voice was a little cold. Even now, this guy was still threatening him with the power of the Han family. He was really reckless. What on earth do you want, my friend? Han Yunchong's face changed slightly as he seemed to realize that something was wrong. It's very simple. An eye for an eye. Lin Sun smiled slightly, revealing his snow-white teeth. Just now you hit me with your palm. Now you have to take my palm. If you can take it, I'll leave immediately. Han Yunchong's face changed completely. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Lin Sun had already stretched out his right hand. This palm was slender and white, and there was a faint cyan Tao rune on it, as if it was made of cyan jade. An indescribable sense of danger surged in his heart. Han Yunchong subconsciously let out a roar. His blood and chi surged, and his clothes suddenly burst into pieces, revealing a tough body that seemed to be made of copper. Waves of blazing spiritual power spread, making his whole body suddenly look extremely powerful. This was a kind of demonic incantation called Copper Spirit. It was known for its marvelous defense. It could shake mountains and was not afraid of swords and spears. Even if it was hit by a spiritual weapon, it would just be like tickling. Do you really think I'm afraid of a little guy like you? Han Yunchong shouted like thunder. His figure was like an ancient barbarian god, causing the sea to shake. The faces of Yi Lingtong and Yi Dongke changed at the same time. Even though they were very confident in Lin Sun, they still felt frightened and helpless when they witnessed Han Yunchong's terrifying power. It was like ants looking up at an angry god. Boom! Almost at the same time, Lin Sun's palm suddenly made the void shake. It was like an ancient giant god holding a sacred mountain, like a saint moving the sun and the moon. This was the secret method of the third transformation of the 9 transformations of Calamity Dragons, Swanee Seal.